One Piece Blades of Fire Chapter 1-20. Chapter 1 The World of One Piece, King of Pirates. The endless sea often feels mysterious and daunting. Bottomless sea water, huge and terrifying sea kings, and islands with hidden treasures and unknown dangers are also ruthlessly devouring people's lives while attracting countless courageous people. Sea Circle Calendar 1500, the first half of the Great Waterway, an undiscovered island. A cool breeze blows on the calm sea. Under the dazzling sunlight, the sparkling sea shimmers with an enchanting luster. Occasionally, a few seagulls fly by with a crisp chirping. These beautiful and comfortable scenes are enough to make any uneasiness calm down, but this time there was an exception. It's true, not true, it's true, not true. On the golden sandy beach, the seawater slapped the sandy shore and made a rushing sound. A boy who looked about 12 or 13 years old was sitting on the beach, holding a brightly colored flower in his hand, and whispering softly in his mouth. Muttering, the free hand kept pulling out the petals, looking at the petals scattered around it. It had been pulling out for a while. And soon, only the last petal of the flower in the boy's hand was left. Really? Pulling out the last petal, the young man stared blankly at the petal in his hand for a while, then threw the petal and rhizome as if to vent, and shouted loudly with his head in his hands. As if he was tired, the teenager lay on his back on the beach panting, squinting at the dazzling sun, and suddenly let out a sigh. Zhang Yang, this is the boy's name, or rather, this is his name on Earth 3 days ago. That's right, as one of the hundreds of millions of ordinary people on the Earth, Zhang Yang was very lucky to have crossed. There was no lightning strike, no car accident, no main god, magic weapon, etc., just fell asleep and woke up. Come to discover that I have come to such an uninhabited island inexplicably, and I have become a little kid who is only 12 years old. Although it has been 3 days now, Zhang Yang still feels a little unreal. But if it's all a dream, what about the thing in his head? As if it was born, Zhang Yang's slightly squinted eyes were completely closed, and his consciousness entered his mind. In the white space, a long knife with a hilt of Dongfa Shozi and a hot breath floated quietly in the air. In the strongest and oldest Zanpakuto of the flame type, the blade is like fire. When Zhang Yang woke up, he found things that existed in his mind, not only that, but also various memory fragments, the 4 basic abilities of the God of Death, cutting fists and walking ghosts, and various all kinds of earth-shattering battle scenes were a little inexplicable at first, but it was only later realized. Isn't this the memory and Zanpakuto of Captain Nakayamamoto, the God of Death? Zhang Yang didn't think too much about why the things in the God of Death appeared to him. What else could he not accept when things like transmigration happened to him? Although, it seems that Ruo Ren Ruahuo can't take it out now. Consciousness exited his mind. Zhang Yang sat up, looked at the endless sea, and rubbed his short messy hair weakly, stood up and walked to a house, built with some branches behind him. That was what he did 2 days ago, and he came to this world inexplicably. There was no one on the island except him, and everything could only rely on himself. In the tree house, there was only a bed made of leaves and nothing else. He took a fish caught in the morning from outside the tree house. Zhang Yang used the oldest drill to make a fire and lit a fire. He used a branch to string the fish to learn how the ancients grilled fish. At the same time, Zhang Yang sat cross-legged beside the fire, closed his eyes and began to absorb spiritual power. This is what he has been doing every day for the past 3 days. Although I don't know if what is happening now is true, but staying on such an isolated island, without electricity, internet or mobile phone, in addition to absorbing spiritual power according to memory, Zhang Yang, there's really nothing else to do. For the past 3 days, Zhang Yang could really feel that he began to have the spiritual pressure that everyone in the God of Death has, which made him excited for a long time. Regardless of whether everything is true or not, the feeling of having power in fantasy is always real. As long as it is a man, in the face of power, there should be no one who can refuse it, right? The fire was not big. After 10 minutes, the fish was roasted, the scales were removed, and the fish was sitting on the beach blowing the sea breeze, looking at the sea in the distance, and biting the fish bit by bit, letting the faint fishy smell and meat go. The aroma spreads in the mouth. Fortunately, even if the fish in this world is simply roasted, it is not much better than the fish on the earth. Boom! The calm sea in the distance suddenly swelled up, and in Zhang Yang's numb eyes, a large, exaggerated, snake-like, but strangely furry monster rolled out. This kind of monster, he has seen several in the past 3 days, which is why he dare not make a simple bamboo raft to go out to sea, even if he has spiritual pressure now, and has learned some ghost ways and white fights, but in the face of this kind of monster, I am afraid it will be swallowed directly, right? Although it is said that as long as his death god's power is well cultivated, this kind of monster can be easily eliminated, but it is definitely not now. The you who wears your sister, what a ghost world. While eating fish, Zhang Yang muttered vaguely, but soon, Zhang Yang's action of eating fish suddenly froze, and he stared at the sea in the distance. There, the monster that was still majestic just now suddenly let out a shrill scream. The huge body flew directly, and then hit the sea with a loud noise, setting off a huge wave. After the wave calmed down, the huge monster, already floating on the sea motionless, apparently dead. Such a big monster. Did he die like that? What the heck did it do? Witnessing the shocking scene of the monster flying up and falling, and then dying, Zhang Yang's shock in his heart can be imagined. He was stunned for a while, and then quickly looked at the place where the monster was before. Zhang Yang suddenly trembled, and flashed in his eyes. Deep in disbelief. Human. It's actually a person. Seeing a large number of silhouettes swimming towards the sea in the distance, the fish in Zhang Yang's hand couldn't help falling to the ground. My God, what the hell is this world? First a monster bigger than a cruise ship, and then a human who can kill monsters in seconds. Can you go any further? On this side, Zhang Yang was in a mess, and on the other side, those people in the sea also came to the shore at a speed that was many times faster than the professional swimmers on the earth, lying on the beach one by one, panting and soaking wet. Ha ha ha, good luck, we came across a small island, it seems we were saved. A hearty laugh came from the mouth of a sturdy, exaggerated middle-aged man with black hair and white beard, a big beard, and a white suit that was wet but not embarrassing at all, exuding a powerful aura. Hearing the laughter, Zhang Yang also came back to his senses, and only then did he realize that those people had already landed. Looking at the group of people, a look of vigilance flashed in his eyes. There were about 50 or 60 people in the group, all of them wearing white clothes similar to suits. What Zhang Yang cared about most was that all of them were carrying a firearm similar to a rifle, which means that this group of people was definitely not what ordinary people. But then again, to kill that monster in seconds, the swimming speed is amazing. Even if there is no firearm, it can't be an ordinary person. But in any case, before determining whether the other party is hostile to you, the necessary vigilance is necessary. Although, this is of no use. At this time, those people seemed to have noticed Zhang Yang as well. One of them got up and ran to the middle-aged man and saluted, pointed at Zhang Yang and said, "Garp Vice Admiral, there is a child there." "Oh, child. Is this island inhabited?" The middle-aged man named Garp turned his head strangely, and when he saw the publicity like a beggar, he immediately dismissed the idea just now. This should be to be lonely. That kid, is it a distressed person? Garp thought to himself when he looked at Zhang Yang who was stunned, then turned to look at the other people lying on the ground, took a deep breath and shouted, "Useless idiots. Get up for me before you swim. After such a short journey, I am so tired, I usually train in vain." Quote. It's all your fault, Garp Vice Admiral. If you hadn't fallen asleep and smashed your own warship, we wouldn't need to be so embarrassed, and... Seeing Garp's roar, the others quickly got up, but a few of them grumbled in dissatisfaction, and suddenly a hash appeared on Garp's forehead, holding a huge fist and sighing. Bang bang bang. Ah, it hurts. Garp Vice Admiral, I was wrong. I was wrong. A series of painful cries rang out. On the side, Zhang Yang, who was watching this scene, was completely unmoved. At this time, he was full of only one thought. Garp Vice Admiral, Monkey D. Garp. Was the monster just now a Sea King? That is to say, this is the world of One Piece, King of Pirates. Chapter 2 Monkey D. Garp. I rely on. After being stunned for a while, Zhang Yang couldn't help but burst out a foul language. He didn't expect that the world he traveled through turned out to be the world of One Piece, King of Pirates. Anyone who has seen One Piece, King of Pirates knows that it is a world where pirates are rampant, human lives are inferior to dogs, and it is always full of unknown dangers. Invaded, like the huge sea kings just now, there are countless creatures in this world. In such a world, even if you have the power of the god of death, unless you can bring out the flow of fire in your mind, no matter how you look at Zhang Yang, you will feel a bad feeling. Is it necessary to play people like this? Zhang Yang thought that he wanted to cry without tears, but at the same time his tense mood was relieved. Other Marines don't know what to do with Zhang Yang, but at least he still knows Garp's character. Even if he doesn't have any Reiatsu now, Garp will definitely not hurt him. After relaxing, Zhang Yang realized that the current Garp seems to be in his middle age, in his 40s, far from the white-haired look in the original book. I don't know what time it is now. Zhang Yang thought to himself that Garp had teached those unfortunate Marines well at this time, and brought a group of Marines with big bags and walked over to Zhang Yang. Little devil, why are you here alone? Where are your parents? Garp crossed his chest with his arms and sat down directly in front of Zhang Yang, grinning. Zhang Yang's expression on Vivi is a bit strange. After all, this is a character that was only seen in anime in the past. Now it appears in front of him so suddenly. If there is no reaction, then it would be strange. They are all dead. Zhang Yang said that his emotions were a little low, his words were false, but his emotions were not pretending. Now that I have come to such a world, I am afraid that I will never have the opportunity to see my parents on Earth again. When I think of this, Zhang Yang can't help but feel a little sad and angry. If it wasn't for this evil crossing, this kind of thing would not have happened. Is that so? Looking at the depression and anger on Zhang Yang's face, the experienced Garp can naturally see that it is not pretending. He sighs, and can only pat Zhang Yang's shoulder. In this sea, there are countless things like this. Even if he has great power, he still can't change all of this. All he can do is try his best to help these poor children. Don't worry, kid, we're all Marines. I'll take you out of here. Do you have any relatives? Garp asked. No. Zhang Yang shook his head, joking, but he came through, and there are ghosts if there are relatives. What's your name? Garp asked again after a pause. Publicity. Zhang Yang replied without hesitation. Even if he changed the world, he didn't plan to change the name his parents gave him. Zhang Yang. This name. A bit strange. Garp repeated the name several times, but found that he had never heard a similar name in his experience, so he glanced at Zhang Yang strangely, thought about it, and smiled. Zhang Yang, right. Since you have nowhere to go, would you like to join our Marine? Marine. Zhang Yang was stunned, not expecting Garp to invite him to join Marine. Yes, Marine, the Justice Marine who specializes in catching pirates and punishing bad guys. How about you, do you want to join? Garp is a bit delusional. If he were an ordinary kid, he would have clamored to join as soon as he heard about catching the bad guys. It's just a pity that although Zhang Yang looks only 12 years old, his heart is already in his 20s. As an adult, it would be strange to be fooled by these two words from Garp. But join Marine. Looking at Garp with a smile on his face, Zhang Yang hesitated for a while, but shook his head. He knew from the One Piece, King of Pirates. On the surface, Marine seemed to be absolutely righteous, but in fact he was better than some pirates. It's even more disgusting, although it can't be said that Marine is not good, but it is definitely a minority among the few, and Zhang Yang feels that he is really unacceptable to let him stay in that crowd of people. Don't want to. Why? Isn't it bad to be Marine? Garp couldn't help but wonder. Zhang Yang lowered his head and didn't speak. He couldn't tell Garp that Marine was too dark, so I won't go. Forget it, since you don't want to go, I won't be difficult for you. I will find a village to settle you down. Seeing that Zhang Yang didn't speak, Garp didn't force it. After all, he just mentioned it. If Zhang Yang didn't want to, then there was no need to force it. Contact headquarters and let that bastard Kuzan come and pick us up. Garp turned his head and said to a marine behind him. Yes, Garp Vice Admiral. The marine saluted, and then took out the phone bug from his arms and started to contact the headquarters. Zhang Yang raised his head and glanced at the phone bug curiously. He was still quite interested in this thing. Seeing Zhang Yang looking at the phone bug, Garp didn't care, stood up and stretched, looked down at the fish that Zhang Yang had fallen to the ground, touched his stomach and said, I am a little hungry. After that, Garp walked directly to the beach, plunged into the sea and swam towards the dead Sea King, dragged the Sea King with one hand and swam ashore. Take care of it, today we eat grilled Sea Kings. Garp threw it casually, and the huge body of the Sea King flew directly to the shore, hitting the beach with a rumbling sound, and said to the Marines. Oh! Marines let out a cheer, and began to deal with the Sea Kings proficiently. Obviously, it was not the first time they had done such a thing. On the beach, Zhang Yang, who witnessed this scene with his own eyes, couldn't help but secretly stunned. This power is really terrifying. As expected of a marine hero who can chase One Piece, king of pirates all over the world. But then again, looking at Garp's age, I don't know if One Piece, king of pirates has been executed now. Watching a group of people collect tree branches and set up huge Sea Kings, Zhang Yang hesitated for a while, but still didn't ask. After all, the role he is now playing is a wrecked kid. If you ask about One Piece, king of pirates like this, you will inevitably be suspicious. Now that you know what kind of world this is, let's take it step by step. However, the first step is to become stronger. Thinking back to Garp's instant kill of Aquaman just now, and the act of dragging Aquaman to the shore with one hand, Zhang Yang couldn't help clenching his fist, and there was a flash of redness in his eyes. If he really just traversed into this world, Zhang Yang might really integrate into an ordinary village and spend his life carefully. However, since he has a big killer in his mind, it is obvious that he may live in peace. Possessing the power of the god of death, he also has a big killer in his mind, the Ruo Ren Ruo Huo. Although he can't take it out yet, as long as his spiritual power becomes stronger, one day he will be able to hold the Lu Ren Ruo Huo in his hand. On that day, Zhang Yang believes that he will never lose to any strong person in this world, or even stronger. Yes, one day I will be able to reach this state too. Staring closely at Garp, Zhang Yang felt a little blood boiling all over his body. He tried to calm down his mood, and Zhang Yang began to practice spiritual power without hesitation. Seeing how powerful Garp is, he can't wait to get stronger. However, Zhang Yang, who closed his eyes, didn't realize that at the same time he started to cultivate spiritual power and increase his spiritual pressure, Garp's sturdy body, who was looking at the Sea Kings, suddenly trembled, and he couldn't believe it. He turned his head and looked at Zhang Yang, who was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. Chapter 3 Reiatsu, Conqueror Haki. This is... Garp, who was waiting for the Sea Kings to be cooked, turned his head sharply and looked at Zhang Yang, who was sitting cross-legged, with his eyes closed, his eyes widened, and his heart was full of shock. Those ordinary Marines can't feel it, but he is different. With observation Haki, he can know the every move of everyone around him even without looking. Zhang Yang stares at him and he knows it, but he just feels that this kid is very good. Just fun. It's just that he didn't expect that the moment Zhang Yang closed his eyes, a depressing, heavy and coercive aura suddenly emanated from Zhang Yang's body. That aura made him think of millions for the first time. Only one person can have the quality of king, conqueror Haki. The feeling of oppression and coercion is almost the same as conqueror Haki. No, it seems a little different. After calming down and feeling it carefully, Garp found that this aura was different from that of conqueror. First of all, Conqueror Haki is an intuitive manifestation of a person's spirit, which cannot be strengthened through practice, but can only grow with one's own growth, but even if it is the newly awakened Conqueror Haki, with great power. But what he felt in Zhang Yang was indeed the feeling of being insignificant and ready to go. This kind of use of Haki can only be done by those masters who have been able to use Conqueror well when they have awakened Conqueror for a long time. However, Zhang Yang is only 12 years old. No matter how he looks at it, how could he be that kind of Haki master? For a time, Garp felt a little confused for the first time, and his interest in Zhang Yang had also risen to an extreme height. He found that this little devil, I am afraid it is not as simple as it seems. Garp Vice Admiral, what's the matter with you? A Marine couldn't help asking when he saw Garp's thoughtful look. It's nothing, you continue to bake, I'll go see that kid. Garp waved his hand, then walked directly to Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang's perception of the surrounding will also be strengthened while cultivating his spiritual power, so he knew it as soon as Garp walked towards him, opened his eyes, stopped cultivating his spiritual power and looked at Garp. Disappeared. Seeing Zhang Yang open his eyes, the aura that seemed to be Conqueror Haki disappeared, and the surprise in Garp's eyes was even more. This kid. Is it really possible to make the Conqueror retractable? Kid Zhang Yang, the one just now, is that Conqueror Haki? Garp asked tentatively. Conqueror Haki. Zhang Yang glanced at Garp suspiciously. What Conqueror Haki? Isn't that what Luffy, Whitebeard and the others do? Looking at Zhang Yang's doubts that it doesn't seem like a fake, Garp was stunned for a moment. Could it be that he guessed wrong? This kid just released it by accident. Whether it's accidental or not, since you have Conqueror Haki, this kid is definitely not easy. This kind of good seedling must be pulled into Marine. Garp pondered to himself, and once again sat down in front of Zhang Yang, grinning and said, Zhang Yang, you really have no interest in being a Marine. Being a Marine is good, you can catch bad guys and exercise your body. Get great power, and if you agree, I can teach you personally. Teach yourself. Zhang Yang couldn't help being stunned for a moment. Didn't he just give up and let him join Marine? Why did it suddenly change again? And also propose to teach this condition in person? Is it? Zhang Yang thought of the Conqueror Haki that Garp just mentioned, and also thought of the spiritual pressure during his cultivation. Speaking of which, there are indeed many similarities between the spiritual pressure and the Conqueror Haki. Could it be that Garp felt his spiritual pressure and regarded it as a Conqueror Haki? However, isn't Reiatsu only the god of death can feel? Various thoughts flashed through his head. Looking at Garp grinning, Zhang Yang was a little moved. Although he didn't like Marine very much, it would be different if he followed Garp. Now he needs a protective umbrella like Garp to give him enough time to grow. Moreover, with Garp, you don't have to get too much contact with the dark side of Marine, and you can also have a better and more regular way to exercise your body. After all, he is not a spiritual body now. The stronger the spiritual pressure, the stronger the physical strength will be. The body still needs exercise by yourself. Not to mention, I can learn Haki from Garp who specializes in dealing with Logia. By joining Marine, you can also rescue other children without parents like you, and... Seeing that Zhang Yang didn't speak, Garp continued to talk about some other benefits, but he thought to himself, this kid would definitely not agree. No matter, this kind of good seedling, even if it is tied, I will tie him back to the headquarters. Okay, I'll join Marine. Zhang Yang said suddenly. Don't be so quick to refuse. Actually being Marine is... Wait, what did you just say? Garp stared at the calm publicity with wide-eyed bull's eyes. He didn't react a bit, so... Just agreed. I said I agreed to join Marine. Looking at a Garp who hasn't reacted yet, Zhang Yang reluctantly repeated it. Agreed. Garp was stunned for a while, then finally reacted, grinning and laughing, and slapped Zhang Yang's shoulder with a big fan-like palm. Fuck. Zhang Yang only had time to let out an exclamation, and a strong force hit his shoulders, and was directly slapped by Garp on the sofa, and climbed up in dismay. his shoulders were sore as if they had been hit by a hammer. Zhang Yang stared at Garp madly said, "Bastard, stinky old man, what are you doing?" "Ha ha ha, sorry, I didn't expect you to be so weak." Garp laughed. Zhang Yang suddenly had black lines all over his head. He knew this guy was funny in the anime for a long time. "I didn't expect it to be even more funny in reality. I didn't expect you to be so weak." He meow, is this what an apologetic person should say? "Garp Vice Admiral, the Sea Kings are baked." A Marine ran back. "Oh, okay. Boy Zhang Yang, see your fish fell off just now, let's come and eat together." Garp stood up and said to Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang was naturally impolite, stood up directly, and walked towards the Sea Kings that exuded the smell of meat. Chapter 4 Kuzan's Shock. The sunset, a touch of red clouds, on the distant horizon. The sunset renders the sea like a dream. Looking at the horizon, a few seagulls fly over the sunset. In the first half of the Great Waterway, on a small island that no one cares about, a ray of fire burns quietly on the coast. Beside the fire, Zhang Yang was holding a piece of barbecue and eating slowly, watching Garp and a group of Marines devoured opposite him. His mood became dazed with the swaying flames. After tonight, it will be the 4th day since he crossed. Zhang Yang understands that starting from tomorrow, his life will begin to change. Why would you pass through? Is all this a dream or real? Zhang Yang doesn't want to think about this kind of problem anymore. No matter what should happen will still happen. Now Zhang Yang only thinks about one thing. Since he has the power of the god of death, since he has come to this place where the strong are respected the world, then leave something in this world. No matter whether it is a reality or a dream, in the end, there is always something left behind. Joining Marine is just a means to become stronger, not his purpose. Blue blue blue. A strange voice suddenly remembered that a Marine took out a phone bug and picked up the receiver. "Hello, I'm Kuzan, is Mr. Garp here?" the phone bug said with a slouchy look. Kuzan. Zhang Yang glanced at the phone bug. At this time, Kuzan should not be Admiral, right? "I'm Garp, Kid Kuzan, why haven't you arrived yet?" Garp snatched away the phone bug and said carelessly while eating barbecued meat. As for where the barbecue came from, of course, Garp caught another Sea King. "Ah, no way, strength is willfulness." "Mr. Garp, please wait, we'll be there soon." Hearing Garp's voice, Kuzan became visibly respectful. "Then hurry." Garp hung up the phone bug and continued to fight the barbecue in front of him. Zhang Yang, who was on the side, couldn't help but twitched his mouth. Facing Kuzan with this attitude, I'm afraid only Garp can do it. After eating the barbecue in 3 or 2 times, Zhang Yang did not gradually develop his spiritual power. After all, he had already caused a misunderstanding just now. Before he grew up, Zhang Yang decided that it would be better to hide some things. After a while, the sky was almost completely dark, except for the fire in front of him. The surroundings were completely dark. Suddenly, a flash of light appeared on the sea in the distance. "Garp Vice Admiral, Kuzan Vice Admiral is coming," a Marine reminded. "Oh, is noon coming? How slow." Garp sat up and looked at the huge warship slowly approaching from the darkness. Zhang Yang also looked over. Looking at the unremarkable warship in the anime, he couldn't help but be amazed. The huge hull and a large number of muzzles, although not as shocking as modern warships, it is by no means an investigation. Soon, the warship stopped on the shore, and a rope ladder was thrown from the warship. "Everyone aboard," Garp ordered. "Yes, Garp Vice Admiral." All Marines responded in unison, and then climbed the ladder one by one in an orderly manner. "Boy Zhang Yang, let's go up too." Garp grabbed Zhang Yang's arm and jumped into the air, jumping directly onto the warship. What a strong jump. Zhang Yang's eyes narrowed slightly. If he is a spiritual body now, as long as the spiritual pressure reaches the level of a seat officer, even the lowest seat officer can easily jump so high, but at this time he is flesh and blood, and I don't know how long it takes to exercise to have this kind of bounce. "Garp Vice Admiral." As soon as their feet landed, the Marines who had been waiting for a long time lined up in 2 rows to greet Garp neatly. At the same time, a 2-meter-tall, dark-skinned, afro-haired man with a pair of sunglasses walked over with his hands in his pockets. Kuzan. Although much younger, Zhang Yang still recognized the identity of the other party at a glance. Sorry, Mr. Garp, I ran into a group of pirates on the way and delayed a bit of time. Kuzan said, and then saw Zhang Yang beside Garp, and couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Mr. Garp, who is he? Kuzan couldn't help asking. There's a very talented kid I met on the island. I'm going to take it back to Sengoku to see. Garp waved his hand and said, let's not talk about this. I'll take this kid to take a bath and change his clothes first, so as not to worry about it. That Sengoku guy is gossiping again. After that, Garp didn't wait for Kuzan and Zhang Yang's reaction, and dragged Zhang Yang into the warship. Kuzan was stunned, then shook his head helplessly. Seeing Garp's men also getting on the boat, he waved his hand and said, let the boat go back to the headquarters. Yes, Kuzan Vice Admiral. Boy Zhang Yang, this is the bathhouse, go in and take a bath by yourself, change your clothes and come back to me. In front of the bathroom, Garp shoved a suit of clothes into Zhang Yang's hands, then turned and left. Where can I find? Zhang Yang just wanted to ask where to find him, but Garp just walked around the corner and disappeared. Doing woolen yarn. Zhang Yang shook his head helplessly, walked into the bathroom with his clothes in his arms, chose a single room at random, took off his bring your own beggar outfit, turned on the water and took a shower. Speaking of which, he didn't seem to have taken a bath in the past 3 days, and now he took a hot bath and felt refreshed. After taking a shower, put on the most basic marine clothes, and Zhang Yang walked out of the bathhouse, suddenly feeling a little troubled. Where to find that old man? Looking left and right, Zhang Yang chose a random direction, turned left and right, and came to the plywood. There, Garp and Kuzan were sitting together drinking tea and eating senbei, and at the same time, Garp and Kuzan also found Zhang Yang. Yes, looks more energetic. Looking at the brand new Zhang Yang, Garp nodded with satisfaction. Even Kuzan couldn't help but look at Zhang Yang in surprise. Indeed, the previous Zhang Yang, dressed in a beggar's uniform and messy hair, looked like a refugee no matter what. Now I take a shower and change my clothes, and it looks completely different. The tall and straight body, although only 12 years old, has a slightly handsome face, a neat military uniform, and dark eyes sparkling with a confident look. How to make people feel comfortable. Old man, where are we going now? Zhang Yang looked left and right, walked to Garp's side, and immediately made many Marines around him wide-eyed. He even dared to call Garp Vice Admiral old man. Who the hell is this kid? Bang! The huge fist slammed directly on Zhang Yang's head, causing Zhang Yang to almost scream. Damn it! What are you doing? Zhang Yang rubbed his head and stared at Garp. If it wasn't for the difference in strength, he really wanted to go up and beat Garp. I'm only 56 years old this year. Call me an old man again, and I'll let you taste the iron fist of love. Garp also glared at Zhang Yang. 56 years old and still not called an old man. In your eyes, what is the old man? Zhang Yang complained in his heart, but he didn't call him an old man because he didn't make a fool of himself. Speaking of which, Garp didn't look like he was in his 40s. The reason why he was called an old man was because Garp's grandfather in the anime made Zhang Yang to remember. Just profound. Looking at this scene, Kuzan couldn't help but smile, because it reminded him of how Garp always beat him back then. Our destination is Marine Headquarters, Marine Vando. Kuzan said. Marine Fando. Zhang Yang glanced at the future admiral and nodded. Marine Fando, who will go to the battlefield of the war in the future, did not expect to go there. You go to rest first. I'll call you later. Garp ate the senbei, then pointed at a marine and said, take him to rest. Yes, Garp Vice Admiral. The marine immediately saluted, then looked at Zhang Yang and said, please come with me. Zhang Yang glanced at Garp, knowing what he and Kuzan would definitely say, and followed the marine away from the splint. How about this kid, isn't he very nice? Seeing Zhang Yang leave, Garp laughed. Well, it's not unnatural in the face of so many marines, and the temperament is quite good. Kuzan made a moderate comment. To be honest, Garp seems to admire the publicity very much, and he really doesn't see any point that Garp should care so much about. Haha, Kid Kuzan, this time you were wrong. Garp naturally knew that Kuzan didn't value Zhang Yang very much. He smiled and said with a serious face, "This kid, but he has the aptitude of a king." King's qualifications. Kuzan's expression changed immediately. He turned his head and glanced at the direction where Zhang Yang left, looked at Garp in shock and said, "Mr. Garp, you mean?" "That's right." Garp nodded and said with a serious face, "That boy, there is only one conqueror hockey in millions." Chapter 5 Marine Headquarters, Marlene Fando. Not a spacious room, a bed, a table and some decorations, other than that, nothing. Zhang Yang was lying on the bed, with his hands behind his head, his eyes closed, and he controlled the small amount of spiritual power in his body and communicated with Lu Ren Ruohuo in his mind, but no matter how he input his spiritual power, Lu Ren Ruohuo had nothing at all. The reaction, there is absolutely no sign that can be taken out. After several unsuccessful attempts, Zhang Yang gave up and opened his eyes. The blade is like fire. I don't know how much spiritual power is needed to get it out. Looking at the ceiling, Zhang Yang sighed. It seems that the Liren Ruohuo in his mind has been set to a certain level, and he can only take it out when his spiritual power reaches a certain level, but it is obvious that his current spiritual power is far from taking out the Liren Ruohuo. I don't know how many. For the god of death, his strength is basically on the Zanpakudo, and then there are ghosts, white fights, etc., not to mention that it is not the publicity of the spiritual body, the flesh and blood body, and the gap between the spiritual body is definitely not a star and a half. In order to truly set foot on the peak of this world, the importance of being like a fire is beyond doubt. But spiritual power can't come in a hurry, it can only come slowly. Shaking his head helplessly, Zhang Yang sat up, but he didn't practice spiritual power. He had already decided that powerful people like Garp seem to be very sensitive to their surroundings, and when cultivating spiritual power, the body would continue to release spiritual pressure. So until the strength is not strong, he will not cultivate spiritual power in front of these people, causing unnecessary trouble. As for Garp's misunderstanding of Reiatsu as conqueror, it is not good for Zhang Yang, and it also has a good foreshadowing effect for Zhang Yang to explain Reiatsu later. Of course, you can't cultivate spiritual power, but other things that don't continuously release spiritual pressure are still possible, for example, ghost realms, or white fights. The memory fragments belonging to the commander-in-chief kept appearing in his mind, and after a while, the information about the 4 basic abilities of the god of death was sorted out. The slash in the box and the ghost refers to the way of swordsmanship, but there is no weapon for Zhang Yang to use, so just pass. Fist refers to the ability to fight with bare hands. Now the space is too small to practice, pass. Walk refers to the instant step. This needs to consume a lot of spiritual power, and the space required must also be large, pass. Ghost refers to the magic attack of the god of death, which is the ghost way. In this case, some of the lowest level ghost ways seem to be able to be used reluctantly, and the destructive power is not very big, but you can try it. If that's the case, then it's a ghost. Vivi raised the corner of his mouth. Zhang Yang got out of bed and stood up, looked left and right, and then moved a chair in front of him. The ghost path is mainly divided into the breaking path for the purpose of destruction and the bond path for the purpose of restraining and imprisoning. Due to the reason of spiritual power, Zhang Yang can only learn the first few ghost paths. This time, Zhang Yang chose to practice the number 1 breaking path of master destruction, rush. The index finger and middle finger of the right hand pointed to the seat in front of him, and Zhang Yang began to sing. At the same time, the few spiritual powers in the body also poured into Zhang Yang's fingertips along a specific trajectory. One of the broken paths. Rush. Zhang Yang snorted lightly, and the spiritual power that was already at his fingertips suddenly turned into a shock wave and spewed out. With a bang, the seat fell down directly, and on it, we could see the slightest cracks. Success. Zhang Yang looked at this scene in disbelief. Just practiced like this and succeeded. But after calming down and thinking about it, Zhang Yang almost knew what was going on. There is always the memory of the commander-in-chief. He is equivalent to being a ghost, but there may be some differences due to different physical reasons. That is to say, in addition to those high-level ghosts, low-level ghosts only need enough spiritual power. With a little practice and publicity, you can use them perfectly. No, it's not just about ghosts, slashing fists and walking ghosts, all the captains will. As long as he meets the learning conditions and practices a little, he can reach the level of the captain. The only difference is that I am afraid that it can only be used. The power is different. It wasn't until this moment that Zhang Yang understood the importance of the captain's memory. Before Lu Renruahuo appeared, the captain's memory was probably his biggest reliance. With the first sweetness, Zhang Yang couldn't wait to start trying other low-level Dao breaking and Dao binding. Without exception, except for the lack of power due to spiritual power, all of them were used perfectly. It wasn't until the thin spiritual power in the body was almost exhausted that Zhang Yang stopped. I have to find a time to get a sword. Besides the Zanpakudo itself, the commander-in-chief is also very good at his swordsmanship. Thinking like this, the fatigue caused by the massive consumption of spiritual power and the feeling of sleeping in bed for the first time in 3 days made Zhang Yang fall into a deep sleep soon. I don't know how long. Boom. A loud noise woke Zhang Yang up, and quickly got up from the bed. Zhang Yang looked up, and saw that the door of the room was violently kicked by a foot, and the owner of that foot, besides Garp, there were other people on the boat. Dare to be so presumptuous. Ha ha. Awake. Well, we've reached our destination, let's go. I'll take you to meet Sengoku. He's very interested in you. Garp walked in with a big laugh. Woke up. Wake up your sister. You haven't woken me up yet. Zhang Yang rolled his eyes and didn't even bother to scold him. This guy Garp is absolutely honest and has the strength to scold him. Zhang Yang might as well think about what he should do in the future. Still, Sengoku is interested in me. It looks like Garp has contacted Sengoku. While wearing shoes, Zhang Yang thought to himself. Following Garp outside the cabin, Zhang Yang realized that it was still late at night. On the deck, the Marines were all lined up, and Kuzan was standing in front of them. In front of the warship is a brightly lit island. Although it is night, because the island is full of lights, it is still very clear to see the whole picture of the island. Magnificent. Spectacular. This is Zhang Yang's first impression of seeing Ma Lin Fanduo. Different from the anime, the real Ma Lin Fanduo is even more shocking and spectacular. From the warship, Marine Fando is quite huge. 2 big black characters, Marine, are written on the huge city wall of the Marine headquarters, and in the middle of the 2 characters is the Marine's logo, the seagull standing on the wrench. As the Marine headquarters, the defense is naturally extraordinarily strict. The huge circular port is full of forts and defensive measures. The Marine soldiers who are always patrolling the Marine headquarters are not far from the Marine headquarters. And there are 4 high mountains forming a square to surround the Marine headquarters, and each mountain has a watchtower with the Marine flag planted, ensuring that the enemy's movement to attack Marineford can be confirmed before the enemy attacks. The current position of Zhang Yang and others is right in the port. Is this the Marine headquarters? Looking at the huge military fortress in front of him, Zhang Yang couldn't help muttering. Chapter 6 Marine Marshal, Kong. Marine headquarters should have received the news of the return of Kuzan and Garp. Although it is late at night, there are still many Marines coming out of the port to greet them. They are arranged in 2 rows, and one by one makes the most standard salute, with a disguise on his face. Incessant reverence and reverence. Witnessing all this hype, couldn't help but marvel at Marine discipline. Of course, astonishment remains astonishment. For Marine, Zhang Yang can't have any good impression except for a limited number of people. After all, the corrupt, cold-blooded image of Marine in the anime was so vivid in his memory. A wooden ladder was lowered from the head of the warship and extended directly to the port. Garp and Kuzan walked down side by side, followed by other colonels and ordinary sailors. As for Zhang Yang, he followed Garp and stood side by side with Kuzan. Kuzan wins. Garp Vice Admiral, welcome back. The two rows of soldiers shouted in unison, the sound resounding through the night sky. Ha ha, that Sengoku guy likes this one. Garp laughed and said. Zhang Yang looked at the sailors, but suddenly thought of something and sensed their reiatsu. In the end, it was sad to discover that even the one with the lowest spiritual pressure was a little higher than him. I sensed Garp and Kuzan again, but Zhang Yang found out that although these two people's spiritual pressure far surpassed those of ordinary Marines, they were not so exaggerated, which made Zhang Yang ponder. It seems that spiritual pressure does not represent one piece, the strength of the King of Pirates world people, but it can also be used as a reference. Mr. Garp, I'm leaving first. Kuzan nodded at Garp, gave a heish and walked in the other direction. Boy Zhang Yang, let's go, I'll take you to see Sengoku first. Garp didn't care either. He took Zhang Yang and walked towards the most magnificent building in front of him. Along the way, all Marines, whether they were school officers or ordinary sailors, saw Garp showing respect. Soon, under the leadership of Garp, Zhang Yang came to the only door on the top floor of the building. Without knocking on the door, Garp pushed gate of opening directly and walked in with Zhang Yang. This is an obviously office-like room, with a desk full of documents, and a sofa opposite the desk. There are various primitive portraits, texts and inks on the surrounding walls, and it looks quite charming. However, Zhang Yang didn't pay attention to these things, because the moment he entered the room, two figures caught his attention. One is a middle-aged man sitting at the desk, wearing a Marine military uniform, exuding an aura like coercion. His hairstyle like a coxcomb makes people laugh, but no one dares to laugh, because Zhang Yang has already recognized it. This person is probably the current Marshal of Marine, Kong. As for the other, it is naturally one of the current Marine Admiral, the future Marine Marshal, Sengoku the Buddha. Similar to the original image, but much younger. The moment he saw the two of them, before he had time to investigate the spiritual pressure of the two, Zhang Yang felt a powerful momentum attacking him. His heart seemed to be pinched by something, as if he was suffocating and uncomfortable, and his face changed. A little pale, and a feeling of extreme danger made him burst out with one of the few reiatsu without hesitation. Immediately, the three people present could feel that a depressing and heavy feeling emanated from Zhang Yang's young body. Although it was completely negligible for them, their goal was also achieved. The momentum on Zhang Yang disappeared immediately. Kong stood up, looked at the breathless Zhang Yang and said with an admiring smile, "Yes, yes, Zhang Yang. Just to see if you are worthy of our cultivation, are you all right?" "No, it's fine." Zhang Yang took a few breaths, and his face gradually returned to normal. He shook his head when he heard Kong's words, but there was a hint of shock in the depths of his eyes. Is this the strength of a person standing at the top of this world? It's just so strong. Clenching his fist, Zhang Yang once again had a strong desire for strength. You two underestimate this kid. How could he be frightened by such a little momentum? Garp sat down next to Sengoku, shook his head and smiled while holding the senbei on the table and starting to eat. Sengoku also looked at Zhang Yang a few more times. Was that Conqueror Haki just now? However, it seems to be a little different from the Conqueror I've seen before. Zhang Yang, we have checked your information just now. Kong ignored Garp, stared at Zhang Yang and continued, but we haven't found any information about you. Your qualifications are very good, and you are indeed worthy of our cultivation, but before that, can you tell us something about you? Hearing this, Vivi felt tight in Zhang Yang's heart. Did he really ask this? Fortunately, I had already thought about how to answer it when I was on the boat. After adjusting his mood, Zhang Yang lowered his head and said, "Those two are not my biological parents. I was bought by them. I just remember that we started from a place with a lot of bubbles, and then we met the pirates. I escaped by hiding in a barrel." Slave. Kong, Garp, and Sengoku froze for a moment at the same time, looking at Zhang Yang with his head down. All three were a little surprised. Zhang Yang lowered his head and didn't raise his head. These three old guys are not fuel-efficient lamps. If they found out that they were lying, it would be troublesome. Alas, I would have known that I would not have joined Marine. Zhang Yang murmured a little depressed in his heart. That's it. Kong nodded thoughtfully, and then said to Garp, "Garp, you should arrange a place for Zhang Yang first. Let him have a good rest, and let's talk about other things later." "Got it, boy Zhang Yang, let's go." Garp took the remaining senbei in his hand and walked out with Zhang Yang. Seeing Zhang Yang walking out, Kong sat down again, looked at Sengoku who seemed to be thinking, and said, "Sengoku, what do you think of that kid named Zhang Yang?" Hearing this, Sengoku pondered. The one just now, no accident, should be Conqueror Haki. Judging from the intensity and scope of the outbreak, it should not even be considered an initial awakening. If you don't consider other things, it is a good seedling, good if you cultivate it, you can definitely become a major force in Marine. Quote. Kong nodded and continued to ask, "Then how credible do you think what he said just now?" "Brother Kong, it doesn't really matter whether it's believable or not, doesn't it?" Sengoku shook his head and said, "No matter what the identity of the young man named Zhang Yang is, we can try to train him first, and then find someone to observe his character at the same time. If he really came here with bad intentions, we can deal with him at any time." Quote. "Well, I'll leave this to you. That guy Garp has never been vigilant, he can't be allowed to mess around." Kong rubbed his brows and sighed. The golden lion who escaped from prison some time ago is also a big trouble that must be resolved as soon as possible. Chapter 7 Marine Academy. Marine Fanduo is divided into multiple areas. In addition to the Marine headquarters, where various generals and school officials live in the center, there are residential areas where Marine relatives and some dignitaries live in the surrounding area. Is there anything else? Area Zhang Yang doesn't know, at least he has learned so much from the anime and the observation just now. As a Marine hero, Garp is only a vice admiral, but his status is not inferior to admiral or even a marshal, and Garp appreciates Zhang Yang very much. With such a big man covering him, Zhang Yang's residence is naturally arranged in the Marine headquarters. Inside, but also the room treatment of the school official level. Wide space, exquisite decoration, soft and comfortable beds, neatly arranged tables and chairs, and a separate bathroom. Compared with the previous warships, it is simply a world of difference. After Garp left, Zhang Yang slammed his body onto the bed, and his heart that had been tense since just now relaxed. In just half a day, the top powerhouses who can be regarded as one of the best in the world of One Piece, King of Pirates appeared in front of him one after another. Zhang Yang's mood can be imagined, but while feeling the pressure, Zhang Yang also felt that he was following him. Garp's coming to Marine headquarters was the right thing to do. As the saying goes, only when you have pressure can you be motivated. There are so many mountains above your head, and it is impossible to cultivate without hard work. As for whether Kong, Sengoku, etc. will be unfavorable to him because of his unknown identity, Zhang Yang believes that as long as he does not show a disadvantage to Marine, and Garp is there, he will never have anything to do, which is also Zhang Yang clearly does not like Marine also joined the reason. The outside world is good, but with his current strength, it is too dangerous. Zhang Yang still cares about his own life. However, Marine's atmosphere is indeed too depressing. When he has the strength to protect himself, he will definitely quit. Looking at the white ceiling, Zhang Yang murmured, then turned over and crossed his legs, and began to practice spiritual power. He had observed it when he came down. These floors are populated by ordinary school officials. Like Garp, they all live on the top floor. As long as they are not too close, the spiritual pressure emitted by their cultivation will not be affected. They noticed. What's more, Zhang Yang has already maximized his perception. As soon as Garp's spiritual pressure approaches, he will immediately stop cultivating. So, one night passed while practicing spiritual power. Early the next morning, a knock on the door made Zhang Yang withdraw from his practice. He opened his eyes, and a trace of doubt flashed in Zhang Yang's eyes. It seemed that this spiritual pressure did not belong to any of Garp. Put on your shoes and get out of bed. At gate of opening, a marine officer in the robe of justice appeared in front of Zhang Yang. Hello, are you Zhang Yang? I was sent by Garp Vice Admiral to take care of you. My name is Carlo, Lieutenant Colonel Marine. Lieutenant Colonel Marine named Carlo said politely when he saw Zhang Yang. What he knew was that the 12-year-old boy in front of him was brought back by Kuzan Vice Admiral and Garp Vice Admiral last night, and he seemed to have met Marshal Kong and Sengoku Admiral as soon as he came back. He has been trained with emphasis, and maybe he will surpass him in official rank in a few years. If he has a good relationship now, maybe he will have unexpected benefits in the future. Hello, what about the old Garp Vice Admiral? Zhang Yang naturally didn't know what Carlo was thinking, but asked about Garp's whereabouts. He was still waiting for Garp to train him. The gradual increase of spiritual power can only make his ghost path stronger, and he can get the flow blade faster, but whether it is kendo, white fight, or shunbu, there is a requirement for physical fitness, otherwise it will be the future. With the flow of fire, he is at best just a mage with high offense and low defense, which is not what he wants. What's more, Zhang Yang knows that there are such things as devil fruits in this world. If you don't learn hockey, especially those who deal with Logia ability, Zhang Yang will be at an absolute disadvantage. I just don't know if I have Conqueror hockey. Garp Vice Admiral has just left the Marine headquarters and will be back in about 5 days. I will take care of your daily life these days. You can tell me if you need anything, Carlo said. 5 days. Zhang Yang frowned, but he just planned to let this guy train himself, so he ran away. This dead old man. Cursing in his heart, Zhang Yang raised his head to look at Carlo, thought about it and said, Lieutenant Colonel Carlo, is there a training ground or something here? Yes, I can take you there now if needed. Carlo replied immediately. No, I'm just asking. Zhang Yang shook his head. Right now, he still focuses on cultivating spiritual power. He is just a layman in physical training. Let's talk about it when Garp comes back. Lieutenant Colonel Carlo, Garp Vice Admiral told me not to go out these days. Can I trouble you to help me deliver meals? Zhang Yang suddenly said. As for why Garp didn't let him go out, it's all nonsense, and the purpose is naturally to stay in the room to cultivate spiritual power. Okay, no problem. Is there anything else you need? Carlo agreed without hesitation. If someone else asked him to be a lieutenant colonel to deliver meals, he would definitely give him a punch without hesitation to teach him to be a human being, but in the face of the infinite possibility of publicity, it was just a meal delivery. This is still acceptable. After sending Carlo away, Vivi raised his mouth and raised his mouth. Is this a fox and a tiger? But it seems pretty cool. The corner of his mouth twitched, and Zhang Yang went to the bathroom to wash up. After washing up, Carlo just brought the food over. There are all kinds of vegetables, fish and meat. I have to say that the treatment in Marine is really good. After eating, Carlo came to clean up the dishes and left, while Zhang Yang continued to practice spiritual power. One night's practice did not make him feel tired, but made him more spiritual. After all, spiritual power is also a kind of life energy in a certain way. The body is constantly increasing the life energy, so it's no wonder that it will be tired. Not only will he not be tired, but with the increase of spiritual power, although he is not a spiritual body, Zhang Yang's life will probably increase accordingly. Not to mention, he will live for thousands of years, but it is certain that he will live longer and longer. In the next few days, apart from eating and going to the toilet, Zhang Yang spent all his time cultivating his spiritual power, so he didn't have to worry about food, clothing, housing, and transportation. Zhang Yang's spiritual power was growing at a rapid rate, although it was not as good as that of a sergeant, it was about the same. There is the spiritual power of ordinary death. This kind of speed, compared to those who have practiced for several years in the world of the god of death, from the point of view of people who can possess the spiritual power of ordinary gods of death, it is simply extremely fast, but even so, Zhang Yang is still not satisfied. The difference in spiritual power between the chief officer and the ordinary god of death, the chief officer and the chief officer, the chief officer and the vice captain, the vice captain and the captain, and even the captain and the captain, is not very big. I don't know how many years it will take to reach the level of vice captain or even captain level Reiatsu. What's more, Zhang Yang has to spend time exercising his body to keep up with the strength of his spiritual power. In this way, Zhang Yang is not necessarily easier than the death god in the world of death. In the room, he opened his eyes, and the Reiatsu that filled Zhang Yang's body also subsided. He stood up and moved his body, and sighed helplessly. Looks like I'm still too impatient. Feeling that the spiritual power in his body was much stronger than 5 days ago, Zhang Yang shook his head helplessly. It seems that the growth of spiritual power still needs to be tested over time, and there will be no significant increase in a short period of time. I feel that the increase in spiritual power is not so obvious. In other words, it is simply not feasible to practice spiritual power like this every day. Everything must be done in moderation. I am afraid that is what I am talking about. We have to plan the next time well. Muttering to himself, Zhang Yang pushed gate of opening and walked out. He hadn't been out for 5 days, and he felt like his body was going to rust. Since cultivating spiritual power has no effect, let's take a rest and go out for a walk. The floor where Zhang Yang is located is the 3rd floor. Going downstairs and walking out of the Marine headquarters, what you can see is the crescent-shaped bay and the endless ocean. Above the bay is a square, and a team of Marines are walking around at this time. Zhang Yang looked around and felt that it was not interesting, and suddenly found that there seemed to be a way to the back of the Marine headquarters. After hesitating, Zhang Yang walked over. After a while, after Zhang Yang came to Marine headquarters, a huge building like a courtyard appeared in front of him, but what really caught Zhang Yang's attention were the 4 big characters above the courtyard gate. Marine Academy. Chapter 8 Plot Characters, Tina. Marine Academy. Standing in front of the giant door tens of meters high, Zhang Yang looked up at the imposing 4 big characters on the door frame, and read it out softly. A look of surprise flashed in his eyes. Such a place. But having said that, as the Marine headquarters, it is not surprising that there is such a place for cultivating new blood. Zhang Yang is a little curious, don't know what is going on here. Since the door is not closed, it shouldn't be a place where entry is forbidden, right? Thinking like this, Zhang Yang glanced at the crack of the door that was just enough for one person to pass through, hesitated for a moment, and walked in. There is a gray and white road leading to the magnificent building. There is a fountain in the middle of the road, flowers and plants are planted on both sides of the road, and behind the flowers and plants, there are 2 open spaces about the size of a football field. The one on the left seems to be an ordinary playground, and in the middle of the playground are some exercise equipment such as barbells, and the one on the right looks a bit like a ring. Zhang Yang was watching, and suddenly his expression changed, because a spiritual pressure appeared in the perception that he had been opening since he came to Marine headquarters, and rushed towards him at an unimaginable speed. Who? Zhang Yang's eyes froze for a moment, he snorted lowly, and the spiritual pressure in his body exploded. He used the simplest and roughest method to directly gather most of his spiritual power in his right hand, and slammed it out with a punch. The next moment. Bang! A dull voice sounded. Zhang Yang only felt a flower in front of him, and a tall and straight figure suddenly appeared in front of him. It was a stern man who looked to be in his 30s. He was dressed in a black suit and had no expression on his face. He exuded bursts of aura that made Zhang Yang feel a little uncomfortable. And Zhang Yang's almost full-strength fist hit the opponent's lower abdomen, but the opponent didn't even move. Conqueror Hockey! The man exclaimed. His stern face looked at Zhang Yang in shock, and then he seemed to come back to his senses, looked at Zhang Yang deeply, and said lightly, "Are you Zhang Yang?" Zhang Yang was stunned for a while, only then did he know that the other party was not an enemy, and nodded subconsciously when he heard the man's words. 18 forces, not up to the standard, but the reaction speed is very fast, and... The man didn't say what he said. He seemed to think about something for a while, and then he said lightly, "Go to the 5th floor to report." Swish. As soon as the voice fell, the man's figure disappeared directly in front of Zhang Yang, leaving only Zhang Yang who hadn't realized what it meant. "Report on the 5th floor. What do you mean?" Zhang Yang blinked, looking at the empty space in front of him, and he didn't understand what was going on just now. But what the man used just now should be the shave in Marine Rokushiki. Really fast. I just don't know which one is faster than Shunbu. And 18 Dao power. Zhang Yang remembered that the seamen with weapons in general seem to be 10 forces. In other words, he is not necessarily comparable to 2 ordinary sea soldiers. Isn't this nonsense? If you use Ghost Dao yourself, it is not easy to deal with a few ordinary sea soldiers. If you have a good knife, you may be able to deal with more. It seems that this kind of Dao power is not very credible. But having said that, with spiritual power, one's own fist is only 18 Dao power, and sure enough, his own fleshly power is still 2 scumbag, so he has to hurry up and exercise. Damn Garp, it's been 5 days and I don't know when he'll be back. Cursing the unreliable old man secretly in his heart, Zhang Yang just planned to go to other places to have a look, when his footsteps suddenly stopped. Report. Zhang Yang looked at the building at the end of the road with a weird expression. That guy just now, wouldn't he be a recruit who came to study? Maybe. Where is this place? Marine Academy. What is Marine Academy for? Of course it is for training students. Judging from what the guy said to himself just now, it might be true. Scratching his head, Zhang Yang looked up at the tall building in front of him, and an inexplicable smile suddenly appeared on the corner of his mouth. Since the old man from Garp hasn't come back and he has nothing to do now, why not go to see what this so-called Marine Academy is like? Anyway, he never said that he was here to report. The person who misunderstood was the guy just now, not him. Hey. With a chuckle, Zhang Yang walked to the high-rise building without hesitation. The door of the high-rise building was not closed. After entering, the scene inside surprised Zhang Yang. In his impression, the academy is the kind of classrooms one by one. However, when he walked into the high-rise building, Zhang Yang not only did not see the corridor classroom, but in front of him was a space smaller than the room he lived in, with white walls on all sides. There is only an iron gate on the wall facing the gate, and beside the iron gate, there is a man also wearing black clothes standing there. Seeing Zhang Yang walking in, the man glanced at Zhang Yang and said lightly, "What floor?" Zhang Yang was stunned for a while, and replied, "The 5th floor." 5th floor. Hearing this, the man glanced at Zhang Yang in surprise, then turned around and pressed on the wall a few times, and the iron door opened automatically, revealing enough space for dozens of people to stand inside. Only then did Zhang Yang realize that this should be something like an elevator. Some curiously walked in, the iron door closed, a sense of weightlessness came, and Zhang Yang knew that he was rising. Interesting. It's completely different from the Marine Academy in his imagination. Zhang Yang is suddenly interested, but he doesn't know if he can exercise well here. If he can, he would rather stay here. After all, that old guy Garp is really too unreliable, just like now, they said they would come back in 5 days, but no one has been seen yet. After a while, the sense of weightlessness disappeared, the elevator door opened, and a huge open space appeared in front of Zhang Yang, and in that huge open space, a group of boys and girls were lying on the ground sweating and doing push-ups. Shouting, 8006, 8007, 8008, 8009. Damn it, 8000. The corners of Zhang Yang's mouth twitched. Although he knew that this kind of intensity was necessary for this world and him, Zhang Yang couldn't help but tremble from the current life on Earth. Wouldn't this really prevent people from dying? Are you here to report? A somewhat cold voice came from Zhang Yang's side, and Zhang Yang suddenly came back to his senses, only to realize that there was a girl next to him who seemed to be about the same age as him. "Well, I just came here." Zhang Yang nodded and said, then suddenly stunned, looking at the delicate face of the girl, a name could not help but come to his mind. Tina, the future Marine Headquarters Colonel, the ability person of the fence fruit. "Is it her?" Zhang Yang murmured in surprise. Chapter 9 Sword Chi, Sword Pressure. Tina, the colonel of the Marine Headquarters in the original book, is one of the few beautiful school officials in Marine, and she has appeared a few times in the original book, and her arrogant personality with a little strong character makes a lot of people. The audience remembered her, including Zhang Yang. However, Tina at this time is obviously not the mature beauty in the original book. She looks at most 12 or 13 years old. Although she does not have the mature beauty of the original book, she looks very petite and cute. "Are you Tina?" Zhang Yang looked at the future Marine officer with interest and touched his chin. "Huh, how did you know Tina's name?" Tina's face suddenly wrinkled, looking at Zhang Yang strangely. "Didn't you just say it yourself? Tina or something?" Zhang Yang said nonsense casually. "Ah, is there? Did Tina say her name just now?" Tina put a finger on her white chin, looked up at the ceiling with a strange face, and thought about when she said her name. Zhang Yang looked at Tina, who looked thoughtful, speechless, and was suddenly speechless. It seems that this girl is still a bit naturally dumb. "Forget it, it doesn't matter." Tina shook her head in distress, and then shouted at the boys and girls who were training, "Everyone, a new companion is here." Hearing Tina's words, the boys and girls immediately stopped doing push-ups and glanced at Zhang Yang who was standing with Tina. A few of them walked aside to rest, but most of them still walked towards Zhang Yang. "Welcome. My name is Hayden. I entered the school last year." "My name is Bastille. Hello." "My name is..." The group of people did not bully and suppress the newcomers as soon as they saw them as written in the novel, but greeted Zhang Yang very kindly. Among them, Zhang Yang also saw a few skilled, future Marine Headquarters Vice Admiral. It's just that Zhang Yang didn't know what they were called because he didn't have a deep impression of them. "Hello, my name is Zhang Yang. I just entered the school today, please give me some advice." After learning from them to say hello, Zhang Yang's eyes turned to those who didn't come to say hello. The corners of his mouth twitched. It turned out to be these guys. There were 3 people who didn't come over to say hello to Zhang Yang. One was a boy with white hair who didn't seem to like anything. If Zhang Yang remembered correctly, this guy was the future Marine general who almost caught Luffy several times in the original book. Logie a smoker. And the other 2 make Zhang Yang even more interesting. There is a man and a woman, both of whom should be about 12 or 13 years old, but the man is several heads taller than the woman, his body is very thin, and his arms are much longer than ordinary people, while the woman has a dark blue head, the slightly curly short hair of color, and the more delicate and pretty face than Tina, looked particularly eye-catching. This pair of combination, Zhang Yang recognized their identities at a glance. Zephyr, students and subordinates, Ein and Bins, appeared in the movie version of The Strongest Enemy Z. "I think, I almost know what time it is now," Zhang Yang thought to himself. "Smoker. Tina is very unhappy. A new companion is coming, why don't you say hello to him?" Tina ran to Smoker and said dissatisfied. Hearing this, Smoker glanced at Zhang Yang and said indifferently, "If you have time to do such a boring thing, why don't you do more training? The pirates won't wait for you to say hello and go with you obediently." "You." Tina stared at Smoker and said angrily, "Tina is very upset, Tina ignores you." Saying that, Tina turned around and walked towards Zhang Yang. Looking at this scene, Zhang Yang couldn't help shaking his head. It seems that Smoker's hatred of evil was cultivated since he was a child. After saying hello, the others went back to their original positions to continue training. Only Tina stayed with Zhang Yang. It could be seen that he was very curious about Zhang Yang. After all, it's rare to add people in midway like this. Why don't you go to training? Zhang Yang said amusedly, looking at Tina who was angrily. Humph. Tina is very unhappy and doesn't want to do it. Tina turned her head and said. Okay, as you please. Zhang Yang shrugged and didn't care, looked around, and suddenly saw a weapon rack not far away. His eyes lit up and he walked over there. Seeing this, Tina rolled her eyes and followed. Zhang Yang didn't care either. He walked to the weapon rack, and various styles of long knives were neatly arranged on it. He picked a tachi knife that was quite handy. Zhang Yang waved it casually in his hand. The controlled appearance appeared, and Zhang Yang, who was holding the knife, suddenly felt a familiar feeling. This is... Zhang Yang was stunned for a moment, then closed his eyes and carefully experienced the memory in his mind. The long knife in his hand also began to dance in a trajectory. Zhang Yang. Looking at Zhang Yang who was wielding a knife with his eyes closed, Tina was suddenly surprised because she felt that Zhang Yang had changed at this moment. Before Zhang Yang gave him a cheerful and relaxed feeling, but now Zhang Yang gave him a feeling of depression and ready to go. In a daze, she seemed to see a burly old man standing there. Behind Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang didn't know how Tina felt. At this time, he was completely immersed in the captain's kendo memory, as if he had practiced countless times before. As the strange feeling in his hand slowly disappeared, the knife in Zhang Yang's hand also danced. Faster, a fierce aura began to emanate from him. At the same time, the spiritual power in his body also began to rush into the knife in his hand frantically, as if instinctively. Zhang Yang opened his eyes fiercely, held the knife in both hands, and slammed it in front of him. Boom! A white streak of energy flew out from the knife in Zhang Yang's hand, and with a loud bang, the weapon rack in front of him exploded, sawdust splashed, and weapons scattered all over the place. This scene suddenly made Tina's mouth, who was watching from the side, open into an O shape, and everyone else who was training also watched over. When they saw Zhang Yang, who was maintaining a knife-wielding posture, and the broken weapon rack, everyone couldn't help but face VV's change. This guy. Smoker got to his feet and began to look back at him again. Ain. Binz glanced at Zhang Yang, and called out to Ain in shock. Yeah, I saw it, and then the power is not very big, but that is really sword energy. Ayin also looked at Zhang Yang in shock. And just when everyone was shocked by Zhang Yang's knife, Zhang Yang was also shocked by himself. Sword chi. Looking at the broken weapon rack in front of him, Zhang Yang murmured in disbelief, then shook his head. No, this is not sword energy, this is sword press. A look of excitement flashed in Zhang Yang's eyes. Chapter 10 Admiral Zephyr. Report, according to your instructions, the door of Marine Academy has been open for 5 consecutive days. 15 minutes ago, it was confirmed that Zhang Yang entered Marine Academy. Marine Headquarters, the Marshal's office, a colonel stood upright at the desk, reporting the news to Kong just now. Well, I see. Kong nodded, and the colonel saluted Kong before backing off. Kong, is that kid really worthy of your attention? A steady voice sounded. Kong looked at the burly man sitting on the sofa, and replied solemnly, of course, everyone who owns Conqueror Hockey is not a simple thing. If cultivated properly, that Zhang Yang will be able to become Marine in the future. A top-notch combat power, but now the only worry is what his temperament is. You always see people very accurately, so this is left to you, Zephyr. With short purple hair and a sturdy body, a general was tensed up by his muscles, exuding a sharp breath. That's right, this person is the current Marine Admiral, Black Arm, Zephyr. That kid seems to be brought back by Garp. Zephyr didn't agree immediately, but frowned and said, since he brought it back, shouldn't he be the one in charge of teaching? If I just take that kid away without saying a word, won't he come back and make trouble? You can rest assured of this. Kong seemed to have long known that Zephyr would ask such a question, and said, it's not like you don't know Garp's temperament, let him teach Zhang Yang, that's fine. I've already told Garp, let Zhang Yang come to you to practice a few times first. Years later, it is up to him to choose whether to follow Garp or not. Quote. In that case, that's fine. Zephyr nodded and stood up and said, then I'll go see that kid first. But before that, I won't give him privileges just because he was brought back by Garp. Of course. Kong nodded. Hearing this, Zephyr pushed open the door and walked out of the marshal's office, walking directly to Marine Academy. To be honest, he was also very interested in this kid who made Kong and Sengoku look different. Conqueror Hockey. Interesting. With a faint issue, Zephyr returned to Marine Academy in a short while, and with a slight push, at least a dozen tons of giant doors were closed with a bang. Zephyr sat down with the respectful look of the man in black guarding the elevator. Take the elevator and go to the 5th floor. Immediately afterwards, everyone saw the scene of Zhang Yang holding a knife. Is that the kid? Zephyr looked at Zhang Yang carefully, then at the broken weapon rack in front of Zhang Yang. A strange color flashed in his eyes, and then returned to normal. What are you doing? Have you finished training? Zephyr shouted loudly, and everyone came back to their senses. Seeing Zephyr's serious expression, they all hurriedly got down and continued doing push-ups. The shouting sounded again. Tina also quickly and cautiously ran to the crowd to do push-ups. It could be seen that she was still very afraid of Zephyr. Zephyr glanced at Tina, then walked over to Zhang Yang. At this time, due to Zephyr's loud shout, Zhang Yang also recovered from the excitement of the sword pressing. Sword pressure is similar to sword chi, but it is substantially different. Strictly speaking, sword chi is a kind of chi caused by air fluctuations when the use of the sword reaches a certain level, while sword pressure means that the swordsmanship in the God of Death has reached a certain level, and the spiritual pressure is released in a method similar to that of sword chi. That's why it is called sword pressure. The two seem to be similar, but sword pressure is much stronger than sword chi. Think about it, how much Zhang Yang's spiritual power is now, and using the commander's understanding of kendo to use sword pressure has such power. Although his current spiritual power is only enough to use once the spiritual pressure is stronger in the future, to what extent can it be achieved? How much help did it help him to improve his strength before he didn't get the fire and let his body become stronger? Thinking of this, Zhang Yang couldn't help but be a little excited. Captain, your memory is really good. Zhang Yang. At this time, Zephyr had come to Zhang Yang, looked down at Zhang Yang and asked indifferently. Who are you? Zhang Yang nodded, raised his head and also looked at the sturdy purple-haired man exuding a powerful aura in front of him. He felt a little familiar, but he couldn't remember who the other party was. Admiral, Zephyr from Marine Headquarters, is also the chief instructor on the 5th floor of Marine Academy. Zephyr said lightly. Zephyr. Zhang Yang was surprised for a moment, he is the future Z. Marine Admiral now, shouldn't his right hand be mechanical? Zhang Yang glanced at Zephyr's right arm, because it was too long, he didn't remember some of the plots, which was why he didn't recognize Zephyr in the first place. A few years from now, you will follow them through my training, and you won't be able to walk out of Marine Academy until you meet my eligibility criteria. Seeing that Zhang Yang didn't speak, Zephyr continued. Oh. Zhang Yang nodded, then suddenly reacted and frowned. I will be here in a few years. What about Garp Vice Admiral? He said he would teach me personally. Garp will teach you, but after you get out of here, that's what Garp is for, Zephyr continued. What? Hearing this, Zhang Yang's nose almost crooked with anger. Sure enough, the bad premonition came true, and the dead old man really ran away. Fortunately, I didn't have much hope for the old man, otherwise I would be really pissed off. However, training under Zephyr seems to be good. He remembers that the future 3 Admiral and some well-known Vice Admiral are Zephyr's students, so it seems that staying here seems to be better than following that unreliable old man. Come down with me, I'm going to check on you first and then arrange training for you. Zephyr glanced at Zhang Yangdao, then walked towards the elevator, and Zhang Yang followed without hesitation. As soon as Zephyr and Zhang Yang left, Tina and the others burst into a commotion. They were discussing about Zhang Yang's splitting the weapon rack. After all, Although they were the best among the freshmen, they could use until the sturdy weapon rack is split. It seems that not many people can use it. Zhang Yang. It seems that we have another good opponent. Yin touched the two small knives on his waist, and looked at the direction where Zhang Yang left with an inexplicable light. Chapter 11 starts with running. Marine Academy is mainly divided into 4 areas. The first and second areas are mainly used for students to exercise and compete with each other. That is, the playground and arena that Zhang Yang saw as soon as he came in. The third area is the teaching building, is the place where the instructor specially trains students. As for the fourth one, it is the living area and the cafeteria behind the teaching building. Naturally, there is no need to say more. Following Zephyr, Zhang Yang went downstairs to the spacious playground. The last group of people above have already started training for more than half a year, so now I want to check your physical condition and arrange a separate training plan for you. Is there any problem? Zephyr stared at Zhang Yang and asked. No problem. Zhang Yang nodded immediately, with a little expectation in his heart. When his physical fitness catches up, he will almost be able to use Shunpo, and his strength will definitely improve a lot by then. In this case, you go to the runway first and listen to my orders. If I tell you to run, run at your fastest speed. Don't stop if I don't tell you to stop. Zephyr pointed to the playground. Zhang Yang was stunned for a moment, thinking of the plot of a novel, and couldn't help but say strangely, running. Shouldn't I attack you? Hearing this, Zephyr was also stunned for a moment. He gave Zhang Yang a weird look and said, this is to test your physical stats, not to test your combat effectiveness. Oh, cough. Zhang Yang coughed twice in embarrassment, and ran to the runway with some blushing. Sure enough, the novels are all lies. Zephyr didn't care either. Seeing that Zhang Yang was ready, he directly shouted, run. Hearing the password, Zhang Yang ran without hesitation, rushing forward at his fastest speed, but only half a minute later, Zhang Yang was out of breath, and his speed began to drop. Seeing this, Zephyr, who had been observing Zhang Yang's changes, immediately frowned. Explosive force. Ordinary. Endurance. Ordinary. This kid really owns Conqueror hockey. It's time to stop. Zephyr stopped Zhang Yang, looked at Zhang Yang, whose face was a little red, and said solemnly, your constitution is too weak, at most the level of the students on the first floor. Ha. Zhang Yang gasped for breath without refuting. He also understood that he was not a spirit body. Even if he had a lot of spiritual power in his body, his physical quality was only better than that of ordinary adults. In Zephyr's view, being weak is very weak. Normal. Now you have 2 choices. The first one, I will take you to the first floor now. You will start to ascend from the first floor, and I will continue to teach you when you return to the 5th floor. The second one, from now on you will go up every day. The task is to keep running, first to develop physical fitness, otherwise all training will be impossible. Quote. Zephyr pondered for a while, staring at Zhang Yang. I choose the second one. Zhang Yang chose the second one without hesitation. With the power of the god of death and his fiery razor-sharp power, he came here only to exercise his body. He didn't really want to learn Marine's fighting style, so there was no need to waste time from the students at the bottom start. Zephyr nodded lightly, not seeming to be surprised by Zhang Yang's choice, and said, then let's get started. When will you be able to run around the playground for more than 2 laps without breathing and come back to me? After speaking, Zephyr didn't wait for Zhang Yang to answer, and walked directly to the teaching building. 2 laps. Zhang Yang glanced around the whole playground and couldn't help licking his dry mouth. This lap is about 500 meters, and 2 laps is 1 kilometer. Running a kilometer without panting. It's really challenging, but I like. The corners of his mouth curled into a confident arc, and Zhang Yang sat down and rested for a while. After his breathing calmed down, he twisted his neck and walked to the playground, where he started running. After half a lap, Zhang Yang, gasping for breath, sat down to rest again, and then continued to run. On the 5th floor of the teaching building, Zephyr watched from the window, gasping for breath and resting, and then he started running again and again in a continuous loop, and couldn't help shaking his head. This kid really owns Conqueror hockey. Having doubts about Kong's words again in his heart, Zephyr turned around and waved to Ain, who was resting. "Teacher, what's the matter?" Seeing Zephyr beckoning, Ain immediately trotted over and looked up at Zephyr's reverence. "Go down and teach that kid how to run." Zephyr glanced at Zhang Yang and began to rest again. "Yes." Ayin glanced at Zhang Yang, nodded, and then went downstairs directly to Zhang Yang. "Tina is going too." Tina, who was doing knife-wielding training, threw down the knife in her hand when she heard the words, jumping and jumping to keep up. "Stop. Go back to training." Zephyr let out a low voice, causing Tina to shrink her neck, and like a frightened bunny, she hurried back to the place to continue training. Downstairs, Zhang Yang was adjusting his breathing when he felt a spiritual pressure approaching him, turned his head to look, and saw Ayin walking towards him. "Why is she here?" Zhang Yang murmured strangely, sitting on the ground and did not get up. After all, the other party was just walking here, who knows if he was looking for him. It's just obvious that Ayin did come to him, because Ayin walked right in front of him and looked at him quietly from a height below zero. "Is something wrong?" Zhang Yang raised his chin and looked up at Ayin. "I have to say that although Ayin is only 12 or 13 years old now, I don't know if it is because of different reasons in the world. The face is really pleasing to the eye." Seeing Zhang Yang looking at her with undisguised eyes, Ayin frowned and said in a cold voice, "The purpose of the teacher letting you run is to improve your physical fitness. 2 laps are just a measure, not for you to run. Go and train with this, like you do, it won't work at all." Hearing this, Zhang Yang was stunned for a moment, and reacted abruptly. "Yes, it is useless to run and stop like this. Keep running, depend on. Just thinking about becoming stronger and stronger has forgotten such common sense questions." "Beauty, thank you." Zhang Yang stood up abruptly, showed a bright smile at Ayin, and rushed to the track to run by himself. Ayin was stunned for a while, glanced at Zhang Yang's running back, turned and walked towards the teaching building. On the playground, this time, instead of sprinting, Zhang Yang chose to jog. Ayin's words just woke Zhang Yang up from a dream. He only wanted to run 2 laps without breathing, but he forgot that it was useless to run and stop. If Ayin reminded him, he still didn't know how much he would waste. Time to react. "I came here to remind me, this girl is probably in love with me, right?" In a good mood, Zhang Yang couldn't help but think narcissistically. Of course, he himself knew that this was impossible. It should be Zephyr who saw his mistake from the 5th floor and asked Ayin to come over to remind him. But no matter what, in short, from now on, Zhang Yang has finally begun to step into the road of becoming stronger. It can be expected that after a long time, when his physical fitness is improved, the strength he shows will definitely surprise people. Chapter 12. It's so noisy. Blue sky, white clouds, today is another good weather. Marine Headquarters Academy, on the wide playground, Zhang Yang was running at a slow pace. His neat marine suit was already wet with sweat, and his face that was slightly red due to the long exercise time was full of determination. Doesn't seem to know why to give up. On the 5th floor of the teaching building, Zephyr Vivi, who occasionally saw this scene from the window, nodded, and then continued to instruct the students in various techniques when fighting the enemy. Ha, 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 ha. Zhang Yang breathes regularly, inhaling through his nose and exhaling through his mouth. No matter how uncomfortable his chest is, he does not use his mouth to inhale, because he understands that once the inhalation and exhalation of the nose and mouth are out of balance, he will soon be out of breath. Get out of breath, can't run anymore. It wasn't until after 5 laps, a total of 13 laps, that Zhang Yang, who felt a little dazzling in his eyes, slowly stopped, and collapsed directly to the ground, squinting at the dazzling sun, gasping for breath. Suddenly, a dark shadow covered the sun. Zhang Yang frowned, and his slightly squinted eyes opened. Her long pink hair was tied into a small braid, her big eyes were curved into crescents, her delicate little face had a happy smile, and a neat marine suit was clinging to her body, outlining her curves that were beginning to take shape. Tina. Zhang Yang was stunned. Humph. Tired and stupid. It's time to eat, so don't get up quickly, or Tina won't be waiting for you. Tina put her hands behind her back, bent down and looked at Zhang Yang lying on the ground, humming lightly. Hey, got it. Hearing this, Zhang Yang grinned isho, gave a funny salute, and rolled over and got up. That's about it, Tina won't bother with you. Smoker, let's go. Tina was satisfied with isho, then shook her head and said to Smoker, who was also beside him. Smoker looked at Zhang Yang and Tina and frowned. He didn't speak, as if he didn't want to speak. This is already the 7th day since Zhang Yang started running. In the past 7 days, Zhang Yang has almost gotten used to the life here. Although he can't go to the 5th floor for the time being, because Tina often comes to remind him to eat, he slowly relaxes. Also matured. As for Smoker, it was purely because he was familiar with Tina. Of course, there could be other reasons. 7 days of practice running with almost no rest, and I don't know if it's because the world is different or what. From just a few hundred meters before to now running half a lap without panting, Zhang Yang's progress is definitely very obvious, although it is not 3 laps away. There is still a long way to go with panting, but with this trend, it doesn't seem to take long. When I came to the cafeteria, there were already many people in it, and as the 3 of Zhang Yang walked in, they immediately attracted countless eyes and discussions. Smoker and Tina are not the strongest on the 5th floor, they are still on the 5th floor. The students in the premium class, taught by Marine Admiral Zephyr, are naturally incomparable in the eyes of the students on the 1st to 4th floors. They watched. As for Zhang Yang, because he ran on the playground for a week, he was naturally seen by the students who came out to take outdoor classes or practice classes, but unlike Tina and the others, no one knew which floor Zhang Yang was on. So although many people are curious about Zhang Yang's bizarre behavior, it is not as well known as Tina and the others. Hey, Zhang Yang, Tina, Smoker, this way. After queuing up to prepare meals, Zhang Yang and the others were just about to choose a seat to sit down, when a shout came. Zhang Yang turned his head to look, and saw a young man with orange-red hair waving his arms towards Zhang Yang and them. It's Bastille, let's go over there. Zhang Yang smiled at Tina and Smoker, walked over with them and sat down together. Bastille, the future Vice Admiral of the Marine Headquarters, is also one of the people who are more familiar with Zhang Yang now. Zhang Yang, you have made great progress recently. It seems that you will be able to study with us soon. Bastille laughed. It's still early to make progress. Zhang Yang rolled his eyes while eating. Ha, come on. Bastille laughed and patted Zhang Yang's shoulder. The group chatted and laughed while eating. This kind of warm feeling made Zhang Yang a little strange. After eating, the 3 of Tina continued to return to the 5th floor to continue training, while Zhang Yang continued to return to the playground to start his own running career. The playground was silent, only Zhang Yang's regular footsteps and panting sounds, and the slightly dazzling sunlight shone, pulling Zhang Yang's shadow very long. After more than an hour, Zhang Yang was out of breath again, so he found a shady place to stop and rest. Turning his head to look at the teaching building, listening to the faint shouts coming from inside, Zhang Yang looked at the white sky, sat down cross-legged, closed his eyes, and began to practice spiritual power. This is what he discovered by accident. It seems that cultivating spiritual power after strenuous exercise has unexpected benefits. Not only can it quickly restore physical strength, but the growth rate of spiritual power is also much faster than usual. This is for the urgent need to strengthen the constitution. As far as the publicity of spiritual power is concerned, it is simply a great discovery. In the past few days, relying on this method, Zhang Yang not only got a good workout in the constitution, but also increased his spiritual power a lot. In addition, he directly used spiritual power to practice in the dormitory instead of sleep every night. Now Zhang Yang's spiritual pressure he has completely surpassed the general Shinigami, and if he continues, I am afraid that it will not be long before he can learn the long-awaited Shunpo. Talk too far. 10 minutes later, his physical strength completely recovered, and Zhang Yang continued to run without stopping. Just like that, more than 3 hours passed. Zhang Yangjung started jogging again. Suddenly, there was a loud noise from the teaching building. A group of boys and girls came out under the leadership of a Marine. The attire on his body should be at least the level of a school officer or even a general. Zhang Yang turned his head and glanced at it and didn't care. It should be another outdoor class or battle practice. Zhang Yang has seen several batches in the past few days. In fact, Zhang Yang's guess was really good. The group of boys and girls walked straight to the playground. After taking a curious look at Zhang Yang who was running, they formed a line under the leadership of the instructor, and then went to the instructor to explain to them. Demonstrate some basic countermeasures against the enemy. Do you understand everything? After the demonstration, the instructor shouted sternly at the group of boys and girls. Got it. The boys and girls immediately responded in unison. I'll start practicing in pairs when I understand it, and I'll check it out in an hour. Instructor said expressionlessly, then turned and left without any hesitation. Upon seeing this, the boys and girls immediately dispersed, and each found a familiar person to form a pair to start training. While running, Zhang Yang took a few glances at the exercises of these boys and girls, and soon lost interest. Although the instructor taught the most practical combat skills, he and the chief captain had accumulated in vain for 2,000 years. Compared with the combat experience, it is completely worthless. Since there are more powerful ones, Zhang Yang is naturally not interested in it. But soon, Zhang Yang couldn't help frowning, because he found that several guys were pointing at him, and it didn't matter if they pointed, those guys seemed to be saying something bad to him. This time, Zhang Yang was immediately unhappy. It's not a problem for the powerhouses like Zephyr to treat him badly. After all, their strength is there, but these scumbags with less than 5 combat powers dare to speak ill of him. Can't stand it. It's so noisy. Zhang Yang turned his head and snorted coldly at those guys, and the spiritual pressure that had begun to take shape in his body suddenly spewed out to press them directly. Chapter 13. Let's get the supreme big knife. Hayden is a student on the 3rd floor. He has been in school for more than half a year and has won the favor of many classmates and even instructors with his good talent and personality. He is one of the best among all the students on the 3rd floor. Strength. This makes Hayden very proud, and even feels that he can already be compared with the students on the 4th or even 5th floor. This afternoon was a practical training class. The instructor taught a lot of things. Hayden learned it very carefully. Although he was arrogant, he also knew that these things were very important to his future survival. After that, the instructor left. Hayden also started training in pairs with a few well-connected peers. It's amazing. You have learned what the instructor taught you so quickly, Hayden. He really deserves to be the strongest student on the 3rd floor. Hayden threw his opponent to the ground with a flexible shoulder throw. Listening to the exclamations of his companions, he was very proud, but on the surface he waved his hand and said, "It's nothing. With a little more practice, you can do like me too." Quote. Even so, it's still amazing. I think Hayden can be compared to the students on the 4th or 5th floor. A student flattered, which immediately made Hayden very useful. He waved his hand modestly and said, "Where, the students on the 4th and 5th floors learn things 1 or 2 levels higher than us, how can it be so easy?" I don't think so. The runner over there seems to be on the 5th floor. He seems to be called Zhang Yang. I don't think he is very good. Another student pointed to Zhang Yangdao who was jogging on the playground. Hearing this, Hayden turned his head to look at Zhang Yang and was stunned. He had seen Zhang Yang several times in the past few days, but looking at Zhang Yang's half-dead exhausted appearance after running for more than 10 laps, he thought that Zhang Yang was on the 1st floor or the 2nd floor. What about the students in the building? Didn't expect it to be on the 5th floor. After being stunned for a while, I felt more confident than ever. Are the students on the 5th floor at this level? If the 5th floor is full of rubbish like that guy, I think I should still be able to deal with it. Hayden said with a confident look, and suddenly the other people were full of admiration. After all, Hayden was considered the strongest on their level, and usually had a strong style. However, just as they were about to continue complimenting Hayden, they heard a displeased voice. "It's so noisy." Boom. Before a few people could react, a heavy feeling that went deep into their souls suddenly pressed down on them, making them unable to hold back their spirits for a while. Their bodies softened, and they almost fell to their knees. Among them, including Hayden. "Who is it?" Hayden resisted the urge to fall down, turned his head with a pale face, and Zhang Yang's dark eyes appeared in his eyes. "It's him. Didn't he get tired half dead from running? What the hell is this terrifying force?" Hayden's heart was beating wildly. For some reason, looking at Zhang Yang's handsome face, he couldn't help but feel a sense of fear in his heart. "You are very noisy, shut up for me, understand?" Zhang Yang glared at Hayden and said. I know. Hayden nodded blankly. Seeing this, Zhang Yang didn't bother to pay any attention to him. He lifted his foot and continued to jog. He didn't feel any fluctuations at all about scaring these guys with Reiatsu. Originally, the Reiatsu of Zhang Yang has far surpassed the general death god. Although there is still a distance from the chairperson, not to mention those future marine elites on the 5th floor, but to deter them, they have never shown their faces in the original work. The Zhongwu scum students on the 3rd floor are still relaxed. It's just that a guy who is scared to this extent is proud, and that Zhang Yang is really helpless. Time passed a little while Zhang Yang was running. During this period, Hayden and the others never pointed at Zhang Yang until they got off the ground. I am afraid they were really frightened by Zhang Yang. After all, Reiatsu is directly applied to the soul. Unless it has a strong strength, it is difficult to resist. From this aspect, Reiatsu and Conqueror Haki do have many similarities. Publicity. Zhang Yang was resting without practicing spiritual power when Zephyr suddenly came out of the teaching building and shouted to Zhang Yang. "Teacher, what's wrong?" Zhang Yang stood up and said strangely, "Teacher," is what Zephyr asked him to call him, and Zhang Yang didn't have any objections. After all, Zephyr really wanted to help him exercise. "Garp is waiting for you outside the door, and he asked me to take you to meet him," Zephyr began. "The old Garp Vice Admiral is back." Hearing this, Zhang Yang wanted to scold his mother, but does this dead old man know how to come back? However, due to the occasion, Zhang Yang changed the name of Garp. "Well, I was contacted by a phone bug just now, let's go." Zephyr didn't care. He walked to the door first, and then pressed one hand against the door, and the giant door was slowly opened with a gap large enough for one person to pass through. "Get out," Zephyr said as usual. Zhang Yang nodded, looking at the giant door that was easily pushed open by Zephyr. He licked his tongue without leaving a trace, and there was a flash of redness in his eyes. Strength. Thinking with some anticipation in his heart, Zhang Yang had already left Marine Academy, and then he saw Garp's face that made people want to rush up and kick a few times. "You still know how to come back, old man," Zhang Yang said through gritted teeth as he walked towards Garp. "Boy, how many times have I said, don't call me old man, call me Garp Vice Admiral." Garp blew his beard and stared, and his fist the size of a sandbag slammed into Zhang Yang's head without hesitation. It's just that Zhang Yang at this time is different from Zhang Yang a dozen days ago. Although it is not strong, the ability of the God of Death has begun to show its edge. When Garp's fist was about to hit his head, his hands suddenly grabbed Garp's wrists, and then he used his hands as a fulcrum to vacate and kick Garp with a whip leg. Move like the wind, with the legs like electricity. Cut fists and go ghosts, fight in vain. Oh. Garp was surprised for a moment, and then his arms shook. Zhang Yang suddenly felt an unstoppable force attack, and the whole person was directly thrown away by Garp. However, after Zhang Yang's body flipped in the air to remove the power, it landed on the ground smoothly. Seeing this, Garp was surprised again. "Old man, your fists are useless to me, and don't you think you should explain it to me?" Zhang Yang pouted and stared at Garp, at the same time sighing inwardly that Garp strength is so strong. Even a hint of hockey is so strong. I am afraid that if Garp really does it, he will be able to solve the current Zhang Yang in an instant. However, Zhang Yang is not discouraged. His current body is just barely able to use some simple white fights. When his physical fitness and spiritual power are raised in the future, it will be completely impossible for Garp to solve Zhang Yang so easily. Ha ha. Explain. Explain what? Garp laughed as if he didn't understand anything. Don't pretend to be stupid. Didn't you say you wanted to teach me personally? Hearing this, Zhang Yang suddenly became angry. Oh, you said that. I'm not suitable for teaching people. That guy Zephyr is an expert in this field. Didn't I already ask Kong to ask him to train you well? After speaking, Garp said strangely, speaking of which, what did that guy Zephyr teach you? And those moves just didn't look like his. Hearing this, Zhang Yang curled his lips but didn't explain it. Garp misunderstood it. It just so happened that he couldn't explain where the white fight came from. However, it seems that this old man can't be cheap. Touching his chin, Zhang Yang suddenly raised the corner of his mouth. Anyway, you didn't keep the promise you made at the beginning, so now you have to satisfy one of my conditions. Zhang Yang said suddenly. Conditions? What conditions? Garp asked suspiciously. I need a better knife. Zhang Yang opened his mouth and said, since the last time he tasted the sweetness of kendo, Zhang Yang thought about getting a good knife to use before Liuran Ruahuo appeared, and now he can let Garp help him solve this matter. Knife. Of course, what kind of knife do you want? Garp said indifferently, with his status, it is not easy to get a famous knife. Just come and grab the supreme big knife. Zhang Yang said calmly. PFF'd. Garp's eyes suddenly bulged. Chapter 14 Publicity's Sense of Crisis. What did you say? How could I possibly have that kind of thing? Hearing Zhang Yang's words, Garp almost didn't catch his breath and shouted at Zhang Yang with a pair of bull's eyes. Supreme block knife. That's a huge knife. There are 12 peerless swords in the whole world. That kind of thing is almost impossible to find, even he can't get it. This kid, do you know what the concept of the supreme big knife is? It also means that you can't find it. Zhang Yang buckled his ears and glanced at Garp. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Garp shook his head like a rattle and said, it's almost impossible for me to get that kind of thing, and a large knife is still possible. Then a big knife. Zhang Yang said without hesitation. A conspiracy-successful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Of course, he knew the value of encountering a large knife. From the very beginning, his purpose was a large knife. Only with this level of knife can he better use the captain's kendo. Huh. Garp was stunned for a moment, then saw the smile at the corner of Zhang Yang's mouth. He immediately knew that he was being overcast, and glared at Zhang Yang and said, good boy, you did it on purpose. It doesn't matter if it was intentional or not, doesn't it? What matters is you have to get me a big block knife now, or do you want everyone to know that Marine's hero Garp is a man who doesn't keep his promises twice in a row? People. Zhang Yang raised his brows and stared at Garp with a half-smile. Garp suddenly stared at Zhang Yang. Why is this kid so sinister? Is this really the owner of Conqueror Hockey? Well, alright, I have to go back to continue training. I'll leave the knife to you. Ka tilde P tilde Zhang tilde General tilde. Zhang Yang grinned isho, deliberately made the last 4 words very long, and then turned around without hesitation and returned to the Marine Academy, leaving only Garp, who was about to erupt. However, staring at Zhang Yang's leaving back for a while, Garp hurried back to his warship and immediately went out to sea to find a large knife. He believed that if he didn't get a large knife quickly, the bastard would not be able to fix it. Really went out and said he didn't keep his promise. On the other hand, Zhang Yang, who was in a good mood, returned to his normal life. Running during the day and practicing spiritual power at night. Since the dormitory is a single room, I occasionally practice ghost Taoism. In this full life that is arranged every day, although I am very tired, Zhang Yang feels very fulfilled, because he feels your body is slowly getting stronger. Unconsciously, time passed, and a month passed. Finally, on this day, Zhang Yang finally ran 3 laps without breathing much. His physical fitness has completely surpassed that of ordinary people. On the playground, Zephyr looked at Zhang Yang, who had just finished running for 3.5 laps as usual, and then started to pant. He nodded with satisfaction. Zhang Yang's progress really surprised him. You must know that even the students on the 5th floor did. People who reached this level took nearly 3 months at the earliest. I didn't expect that the foundation was worse than their publicity, but they did it in more than a month. Is it really worthy of being the owner of Conqueror Hockey? Zephyr naturally didn't know that Zhang Yang's progress was so fast because there was a lot of spiritual energy in his body, and Zhang Yang didn't have Conqueror Hockey, but a power that completely surpassed his cognition, Reiki. Well, your basic training is now complete, but I said it before, the next training is not comparable to the previous small troubles. Are you mentally prepared? Zephyr said with a serious face. You can start anytime. Zhang Yang replied without hesitation, and there was even a trace of expectation in his eyes. He can feel that compared to himself when he first crossed over a month ago, his physical fitness has improved a lot. Although his physical strength has not improved too much, his speed, endurance, and jumping ability have all improved. I know how much, and what excites Zhang Yang the most is that his constitution seems to have almost met the requirements of using Shunpo. Just over a month of basic training has brought him such a big change, and Zhang Yang is really looking forward to how strong the next training will make him. Seeing Zhang Yang's slightly expectant look, Zephyr also had a higher opinion of Zhang Yang. People who do not know how to make progress will never try to become stronger. In his opinion, the current publicity is truly in line with a character with Conqueror Hockey. If that's the case, then I won't say much more. Take a good rest today. I'll give you your next training schedule later. As for those combat skills. Having said this, Zephyr took a deep look at Zhang Yang and said lightly, I think you don't need it, do you? Hearing this, Zhang Yang's heart skipped a beat, knowing that Zephyr had seen the white fight he showed in front of Garp a month ago. Teacher, Zhang Yang opened his mouth, just about to make up a random reason to explain the white beating, but was interrupted by Zephyr. I don't want to know where your moves come from, I just want to know who you will use them against in the future. Zephyr said solemnly, staring at Zhang Yang's eyes. Hearing this, Zhang Yang was stunned for a moment, then he understood and said seriously, of course it's a pirate. I hope you will remember what you said today. Zephyr gave Zhang Yang a deep look and turned to leave. Seeing this, Zhang Yang exhaled slowly. He could feel that there was a killing intent on Zephyr just now. As long as he behaved abnormally just now, Zephyr would definitely kill him. At this moment, Zhang Yang suddenly felt a faint sense of crisis. Maybe staying here is not as safe as he thought. In fact, whether it is marine or pirates, although Zhang Yang is more inclined towards pirates, he doesn't hate marine so much. He also understands that no matter how absolute justice is, there is definitely a more terrifying darkness behind it. If marine, it's really not bad. Even if he stays in marine in the future, it will be fine. But now it seems that Zhang Yang's thinking is a bit too naive. His ability to be a god of death is really too rare for people in this world. As the saying goes, people who are not my race will have different hearts, not to mention that any unstable marine is still not allowed. If Zhang Yang continues to use it, the various abilities of the god of death will definitely make marine doubt him, unless he can have any good explanation. It's just that the god of death has different abilities of slashing fists and walking ghosts. Even if he uses the devil fruit, he can't explain it very well, right? Alas, why are there so many doubts? Everyone should be happy. Looking at Zephyr's back, Zhang Yang sighed helplessly. For the time being, as long as he doesn't show any bad things about marine, there won't be any danger, but it's hard to say in the future. Whether you choose to go out alone or choose to enter the marine cultivation, it is not so safe. In this case, in order to cope with the dangers that will arise at some point, we must work hard to increase our strength. A flash of light flashed in Zhang Yang's eyes, and he walked to the dormitory behind the teaching building without hesitation. Chapter 15 Shunpo's Cultivation. Marine College is divided into two parts, male dormitory and female dormitory. The dormitory style is a 3-story bungalow, neatly arranged, with a wall separating the male and female dormitories. The layout of the dormitory is also very simple. There is a bed and a table, which is very simple and meets the requirements of the dormitory. Zhang Yang did not go back to the dormitory, but went straight to the roof of the floor where his dormitory was located, let go of his perception, and he was alone in the entire dormitory area. This is also inevitable. After all, it is still class time, and the students are all receiving the training of their respective instructors in the teaching building. As for why Zhang Yang came here specially, it is very simple, because the playground exposed to the public is not suitable for the next thing, the advanced moving footwork of the death god, and the practice of Shunbu. As the strongest god of death in the millennium, the commander-in-chief's Shunpo accomplishment is naturally unquestionable. Being able to use Shunpo flexibly as soon as possible will definitely greatly improve Zhang Yang's strength. Let's get started. Closing his eyes, the memory fragments about Shunpo kept appearing in Zhang Yang's mind, and he began to carefully appreciate the captain's understanding and use of Shunpo. The surroundings were quiet, and a breeze blew through, blowing the flamboyant clothes and broken hair. At a certain moment, Zhang Yang suddenly opened his eyes, as if he had practiced countless times. The spiritual power in his body began to gather on the soles of his feet, and then burst out violently without any sluggishness. Bang! With a soft sound, Zhang Yang shot out at an extremely fast speed, and appeared on the edge of the building in the blink of an eye. Without a doubt, this is Shunpo. However, Zhang Yang pouted. Obviously, Shunpo did not meet his requirements. There is a clear sound. It should be the way of the explosion that needs to be adjusted, and the speed is not as fast as imagined. It should be related to the amount of spiritual power used. Do it again. Standing on the edge of the building, Zhang Yang thought carefully about what was wrong with Shunpo just now. After comparing it with the memory of the captain in his head, he turned around and the spiritual power in his body gathered on the soles of his feet again. Instant step. Bang! A much smaller voice sounded than before. Zhang Yang's figure flashed, and in the blink of an eye, he came to the edge of the building opposite. Then, without any pause, another soft sound rang out, and Zhang Yang disappeared again. Next, a slight noise continued to sound on the entire roof, and in the continuous weakening, the figure of Zhang Yang was constantly flashing and appearing in various places. Suddenly, Zhang Yang's feet softened, and the whole person almost fell down, showing his figure from the rapid movement. Not enough spiritual power. Zhang Yang shook his head with a pale face, and sat on the ground to recover his spiritual power. From the exercise just now, although it has not yet reached the perfect point, it is almost the same. Due to physical reasons, the one-time burst of spiritual power is also limited. If you want a faster speed, you have to work hard to strengthen the constitution. Moreover, spiritual power is also a problem. The higher the speed of Shunpo, the greater the consumption of spiritual power, but this is not urgent, and it can only be cultivated slowly over time. After all, he is not Kurosaki Ichigo, whose mother is a captain-level quencher, his father is a captain-level death god, and he has a vice-captain-level Reiatsu plug-in king from the very beginning. After resting for a while, Shunpo was almost finished. Zhang Yang returned to the dormitory, lay on the bed, and began to sleep after a long absence. Although it is said that cultivating spiritual power can replace sleep, after all, Zhang Yang is still flesh and blood. Occasionally sleeping is still good for the body. After all, sleeping is also a great enjoyment, isn't it? Chapter 16 Learn Swordsmanship with Tina. After an unknown amount of time, Zhang Yang was woken up in a daze, and when he opened his eyes, he saw Bastille arrived at his dormitory at some point. Bastille, what's the matter? Is something wrong? Zhang Yang rubbed his eyes and sat up. Hearing this, Bastille gave Zhang Yang a thumbs up and said helplessly, Zhang Yang, you really can, is there anything else? The teacher is looking for you, and you are still sleeping here. Looking for me? Zhang Yang was stunned for a while, then woke up and remembered that Zephyr was going to give him a training table. He was speechless for a while. Shit, I haven't slept for too long, and I fell asleep once today. What time is it? Zhang Yang slapped him and scratched his head helplessly. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Bastille replied, then remembered something, and looked at Zhang Yang with a strange expression. By the way, Tina was looking for you everywhere at noon just now. Okay. Ignoring Bastille's strange eyes, Zhang Yang nodded, started to put on clothes and shoes, and then started to wash. Needless to say, Tina, the little girl, didn't find him at noon, and she must be angry again. I'd better go to the 5th floor to find her, and take the training table by the way. Speaking of which, I don't know what Tina's mentality is. She seems to like to pester Zhang Yang very much. She finds Zhang Yang to eat at noon every day, and she always runs to see Zhang Yang running when she has nothing to do. Sometimes Zhang Yang even thinks narcissistically, will this little girl fall in love with him? Hey, Zhang Yang, do you think Tina likes you? Bastille approached Zhang Yang who was brushing his teeth and said gossip. Perhaps. Zhang Yang rolled his eyes, with a vaguely frothy mouth in his mouth, feeling a little weird in his heart. The grown-up Tina is definitely one of the rare beauties in Marine, but now Tina is just a cute little loli. Zhang Yang looks like she is only 12 years old now, but she is already in her 20s. When he is old, does he have any strange uncle hobbies? It really feels strange to be liked by such a little loli. Oh no, this is just speculation, Tina may not really like him. Seeing that Zhang Yang was so calm, Bastille also felt bored, so he sat aside and waited for Zhang Yang with a dull face. After washing up, Zhang Yang said to Bastille, let's go to the 5th floor. The 5th floor. Can you go back to the 5th floor? Bastille was stunned for a moment. When can I go back to the 5th floor? Zhang Yang glanced at Bastille angrily, then took the lead to walk towards the teaching building. Bastille was stunned for a moment, and then quickly followed. Before coming to the teaching building, there were students on the playground who were practicing battle on the ring. Zhang Yang glanced at it, and then looked at the teaching building in front of him. The last time I came here seemed to be more than a month ago. Time flies so fast. With a sigh, Zhang Yang took the elevator directly to the 5th floor. The 5th floor is still the 5th floor, the empty space, the students who are sweating, and the new weapon rack. Everything seems to be the same as a month ago. Everyone, look who's here. Bastille shouted at the trainees who were training, and immediately let them all look over. When they saw Zhang Yang, everyone's performance was different. The future vice admirals are still very good at getting along with people. When they saw Zhang Yang, they all came over to say hello to Zhang Yang and had a few chats. Of course, some people didn't come and still train on their own, such as Bins, like Smoker, like Tina. This guy. Seeing Tina's angrily holding her head to practice the knife, Zhang Yang shook his head helplessly. Just as he was about to go there, he found a figure with a faint scent standing in front of him. Is something wrong? Zhang Yang looked at Ain in front of him in surprise. This girl seemed to have only training and Zephyr in her eyes. Didn't she usually like to be in contact with people? Is the sun coming out of the west today? The teacher asked me to give it to you. Ain shoved a form into Zhang Yang's hand, and then returned to Bins to continue training without looking back. Zhang Yang pouted, looked at the form in his hand, and then his face turned black. 2 kilometers sprint in the morning. 1,000 push-ups. 10 sets a day. 200 kilograms load frog jumping. 10 laps. Wait. I rely on. Zhang Yang couldn't help but burst out a foul language, which immediately attracted Bastille to look over, glanced at the form in Zhang Yang's hand, and couldn't help but open his mouth wide, looked at Zhang Yang with sympathy and said, you are more intense than training. We are even taller. It seems that the teacher is going to put you to death. Go aside. Zhang Yang glared at Bastille and drove away the gloating guy. He carefully looked at the training table and found that although the intensity of these trainings was outrageous, they seem to be targeted trainings. Sprinting can exercise his explosive power, push-ups can exercise his arm strength and waist strength, and a series of trainings such as weight-bearing frog jumping are completely specially planned training for all parts of his body. Zhang Yang has completed all these trainings, and his physical strength will definitely reach an unprecedented level. Silently took the form into his arms, Zhang Yang looked at Tina, scared Tina who was secretly watching here, and hurriedly continued to practice the most basic swordsmanship. Vivi raised the corner of his mouth, and Zhang Yang walked over without hesitation. On the side, Bastille, who was watching this scene, secretly gave Zhang Yang a thumbs up. "Beauty, what's the matter? You seem very unhappy." Walking in front of Tina, Zhang Yang stared at Tina with a smile but not a smile. "Humph." Tina turned around and continued to practice swordsmanship in a different direction. "Oops, originally I thought that someone's swordsmanship was too bad to give pointers. But it seems that someone doesn't appreciate it very much." Zhang Yang sighed, as if pointing. "You are talking nonsense. Tina's swordsmanship is not bad." Tina suddenly turned around and stared at Zhang Yang. "Is it really not bad?" Zhang Yang gently walked to the weapon rack and took a long knife, waved it casually, and said, "Try to attack me." "Humph. Attack is attack." Tina immediately said unconvinced, and swung the long knife in her hand, as if Zhang Yang rushed over. Zhang Yang looked as usual, and the long knife in his hand also greeted him. Next moment. Ding, 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 ding. The sound of a series of weapons intersecting made everyone look over. Then, they saw Zhang Yang and Tina's long sword in a quick confrontation, but after a while, they found that Tina was constantly retreating. Some tricks can't stand it anymore. Ding! There was another clear cry. Tina let out an exclamation, and the long knife in her hand was directly swept up by Zhang Yang, and spun in the air and stuck on the ground. The blade trembled. Everyone stared blankly at this scene. No one could imagine that Zhang Yang's swordsmanship was so powerful. You must know that although Tina's swordsmanship is not the best here, it is almost the same. But defeated Tina with an overwhelming advantage, which could not help shocking them. His swordsmanship is really amazing. Aiyin looked at Zhang Yang holding a knife in one hand with a strange expression, and muttered in her heart. Chapter 17 The Big Knife, cut off the water. How could? Tina stared blankly at the long knife that fell on the ground, and then looked at Zhang Yang, who was holding the long knife, and didn't react at all for a while. Don't you practice swordsmanship every day? When the teacher taught them swordsmanship, she also listened carefully, didn't she? But this guy Zhang Yang just runs and runs every day. Why is his swordsmanship so powerful? It's just that Tina forgot that the one who split the weapon rack apart last time was Zhang Yang. Tina forgot this, but others won't, so after being shocked that Tina was defeated so easily, she quickly reacted and looked at Zhang Yang differently. People on the 5th floor can become a school officer at the lowest level after they go out, and it is not impossible to even become a general directly. Before Zhang Yang, apart from the one time he split the weapon rack, he hardly had any outstanding performance. Although most of them looked at I was very enthusiastic about Zhang Yang, but it was only superficial. And today, Zhang Yang finally showed a part of his strength, which naturally made them admirable. On the other side, looking at Tina, who was a little dazed, Zhang Yang danced a sword flower with the long sword in his hand. Well, yes, after the body became stronger, the use of kendo became more proficient. However, Zhang Yang also understands that the first reason that he can defeat Tina so easily is because this basic swordsmanship is far from the swordsmanship accumulated by the captain over thousands of years, and the second is because Tina is a girl and has a little power. Insufficient. The so-called one's strength defeats 10 guild. If one day encounters a swordsman who is good at swordsmanship and has a lot of strength, then Zhang Yang will not be so easy to solve. But Zhang Yang is not worried. After all, he is also getting stronger. Moreover, for him, kendo is just one of the fighting methods. Ghost Road, White Fight, Shunpo, and even the rushing edge that will appear in the future. As long as he is given time, he will definitely become stronger than anyone else. Ahem. That's too far. How about it? Do you want me to teach you? Zhang Yang said with a half smile. Humph. Hearing this, Tina turned her head, and then couldn't help but turn her head and said, do you really want to teach Tina swordsmanship? Of course, as long as you don't get angry. Zhang Yang nodded with a chuckle. Since, in this case, Tina will forgive you. Tina turned her head and said, reluctantly. Looking at Tina's arrogant appearance, Zhang Yang didn't break it. He shook his head amusingly, and with a flick of his hand, the long knife just fell on the weapon rack. Zhang Yang, can you be a kid? I thought you didn't know anything. So you're still a master at hiding things. Bastille also ran over at this time, leaning on Zhang Yang's shoulders and looking like we knew each other very well. She said, hey, teach me too. Don't you know, my swordsmanship is a complete mess. Okay. Zhang Yang rolled his eyes and said. Seeing this, the others were also moved, but since they were not familiar enough with Zhang Yang, no one was too embarrassed to come over. Zhang Yang didn't care. He was only familiar with Tina and Bastille. As a friend, it was nothing to teach them swordsmanship, but the others would not do his business. As for what if Zephyr finds out that he can be so powerful in swordsmanship? I have also thought about this point of publicity. Since the white fight has been revealed, I simply don't hide the rest. Zephyr and Marine can think what they want, as long as he doesn't show any disadvantage to Marine. Zhang Yang couldn't believe it. For a potential stock with such great potential as his own, even if his origins were unknown, Marine could deal with him so easily. Let's go, I have to train tomorrow. Let's coach you first while there is still time. Zhang Yang glanced at the sky outside the window and walked downstairs with the two of them. Behind them, Smoker frowned and stared at the backs of Tina and Zhang Yang. Looming. Zhang Yang, Smoker seems to have been staring at you just now. Going downstairs, Bastille glanced at Tina, leaned into Zhang Yang's ear and whispered, that fellow Smoker seems to have always had some thoughts on Tina. You take Tina away in front of him like this, that guy can't do it. I'm going to explode. Well, I know. Zhang Yang nodded and glanced at Tina. He naturally knew that Smoker liked Tina, which could be seen from the relationship during this period of time. Smoker stared at him and Zhang Yang just now knew that, but he didn't care much. First of all, now that his body is only 12 years old, he can't do anything even if he wants to. He really has no interest in Tina, at least, not now. Secondly, Smoker has nothing to do with him when he's angry. He's just happy, he doesn't care about other people. In the end, even if Smoker comes to trouble him, he is not afraid of Smoker at all, but I don't know if the current Smoker eats the smoke fruit. Otherwise, he may not be able to be hockey in elementalization. Okay, when I didn't say it. Seeing that Zhang Yang didn't care, Bastille shook his head helplessly. Why does he always feel that everything is within the expectations of this guy? Is this the so-called king's demeanor? At this time, the three had come to the playground. You guys practice this pair first. I'll see how your swordsmanship is, and then I'll give you some advice. Zhang Yang handed over the two long knives that came from the 5th floor just now to the two of them. The two nodded and began to practice against each other. Bastille is right, his swordsmanship is indeed a mess. In just a while, Bastille lost to Tina, which made Tina very happy, so my swordsmanship is not bad. Although, there are so many flaws in the swordsmanship of the two in Zhang Yang's eyes. Next, Zhang Yang really began to pick out their own faults for the two and help them make up for the flaws in swordsmanship. With the memory of the commander-in-chief, this is still easy. 2 hours later, Bastille and Tina both looked at Zhang Yang with shocked expressions. They practiced against each other again just now. Although Bastille still lost, they clearly felt the changes in themselves and just now. Compared to before, I have improved a lot. Zhang Yang, where on earth did you learn such a powerful swordsmanship? Why do I feel that it is even more powerful than what teacher Zephyr taught you? You should just become a teacher. Bastille exclaimed exaggeratedly. Be your sister's teacher, hurry back to training. Tina, go back too, you need to practice more swordsmanship. Zhang Yang glared at Bastille and said to Tina. Well, thank you for teaching Tina swordsmanship. Tina is very happy. Tina faced Zhang Yang, Tianti and Isho, and then went back to the 5th floor with Bastille. As for Zhang Yang, he walked under the big tree next to the playground, put his hands behind his head and looked at the sky. He felt that Zephyr's Reiatsu had arrived at the entrance of Marine Academy. After a while, the door was pushed open and Zephyr walked in with a long box. Closing the door, Zephyr saw Zhang Yang under the tree at a glance, and walked down holding the box. Teacher. Zhang Yang stood up, looking astonished that he had just seen Zephyr. Zephyr nodded, as if he hadn't said those words to Zhang Yang in the morning. He handed the long box in his hand to Zhang Yang and said, Garp asked me to give it to you. Hearing this, Zhang Yang was stunned for a moment, and then he reacted. Vivi's face was happy. This dead old man is quite fast. He really got a big quick knife for him in a month. Remember to start training tomorrow. It doesn't matter if you can't do it at the beginning, but you must practice to the limit before you stop, so as to have the best effect, and the exercise sequence must be carried out according to the table, otherwise it will cause damage to the body. Irreparable damage, you must remember this. Zephyr said suddenly. Well, I understand. Zhang Yang nodded with a serious face, which is why he wanted someone to train him. It's okay to train himself, but if something is not done well, it will be a problem if it leaves something dark to the body. Zephyr nodded, didn't say anything more, and turned to leave. Zhang Yang glanced at the back of Zephyr leaving, and then opened the box in his hand. Suddenly, a long knife appeared in his eyes. Although he didn't pull it out, Zhang Yang still felt a faint chill. And on the scabbard, Zhang Yang also saw 2 words. Water cut. Zhang Yang muttered. Chapter 18 Marine Conference. Water cut. Gently reciting the name of the knife, Zhang Yang put the box on the ground, and took out the big sharp knife called, Breaking Water. The broken water is black as a hole, with only some white lines on the hilt. Holding the hilt, Zhang Yang slowly pulled it out. Under the sun, some black patterned blades shone with a biting cold light. Zhang Yang looked at it carefully, and remembered that in the anime Zoro also has a big sharp knife called Chushui. Chushui is broken, both have the word, water, but I don't know which one is more powerful. Holding the broken water, he waved it casually, the blade pierced the air, and a sharp whistling sound suddenly sounded in the air. Zhang Yang looked left and right, found a solid-looking stone, and directly slashed it with a knife. With a ding sound, Zhang Yang hardly felt any resistance, and the stone was directly cut in half. What a sharp knife! Zhang Yang couldn't help but snorted. He didn't use much energy just now. He could easily cut a stone in half just by its sharpness. Tai Rumu is a little underestimated, right? But those have nothing to do with Zhang Yang. This big fast knife is enough for him, and even when the fire comes out, this knife can be discarded. In Zhang Yang's eyes, the fire is the one that can really destroy the sky. Earth's peerless sword. But with this knife, the old man's swordsmanship can indeed be used more smoothly. After playing with the water cut for a while, Zhang Yang retracted the scabbard and put it back in the box. A knife is a good knife, but now is not the time to use it. Now, go back and have a good rest and prepare for tomorrow's training. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to start playing with my life again. Vivi raised the corner of his mouth. Zhang Yang touched the training watch in his arms, and walked towards the dormitory area. At night, it also began to descend as the students walked out of the teaching building. It was night, the brightly lit Marineford was quiet, only the soldiers walking by occasionally made the neat footsteps. The sea in the distance was calm, and the bright gecko shone on the sea, giving off an intoxicating luster. Marine Headquarters, Conference Room, a very rare gathering of Marine generals tonight. Marine Headquarters Marshal Kong, current Marine Admiral Blackarm Zephyr, Sengoku the Buddha, Marine Hero Vice Admiral Garp, future 3 Admiral Kuzan, Kazaru Bolsolino, Akainu, and veteran Marine Vice Admiral Crane, etc. In short, almost all of the Marine generals who were ranked high in the Marine headquarters were already in place, and a powerful aura filled the entire room. At the door of the conference room, 2 Marines at the officer level stood upright, couldn't help swallowing, and there was a trace of cold sweat on their foreheads. Since everyone is here, let's start the meeting. Kong looked at the Marine generals sitting in 2 rows below, and said with a serious face. Everyone below was also staring at Kong. Oh no, except for one person, that is Marine hero Garp. He didn't seem to hear Kong's words. He ate the senbei to himself, making a clicking sound. Kong glanced at Garp, didn't care, and continued. Just now the world government sent information. It seems that someone has started to study the blank history, and asked us to solve this matter immediately. Hearing this, except for some insiders such as Sengoku, the expressions of others suddenly changed. In the blank 100 years, although most people here do not understand it at all, this is something that is strictly forbidden to be studied by World Conquer, and there are still people studying it. Is it a pirate, or those scholars? He Dao, who is much younger than in the anime. HMPH. No matter how hard you clean up, the trash can't be cleaned up. Has it reappeared? Akainu said coldly. It's not a pirate this time. Kong opened his mouth, and immediately made everyone quiet, so he continued. It's scholars, and it seems to be those scholars in O'Hara. O'Hara, that archaeologist's shrine. How could it be them? Those guys seem to have been very peaceful. Several vice admirals suddenly said in surprise. It has been determined that it is them. Once O'Hara's guys continue to study the blank history, it is very likely that ancient weapons will be awakened. In order to prevent the destruction of the World Cup, the world government requires us to cooperate with CP9 to carry out a buster call on O'Hara. Kong said with an expressionless face, which suddenly changed the expressions of many generals. Buster call. Is it going too far? Yeah, it's enough to arrest them all. There are a lot of ordinary people on it. Most people still disapprove of the use of buster call. After all, once buster call is used, it means the complete destruction of O'Hara, so many human lives, even they feel it is too cruel. Kong didn't speak, and Sengoku and the others just watched the scene quietly. Don't be so naive, idiots. A cold drink instantly silenced the conference room. Akainu looked coldly at the vice admirals who disapproved of buster call, and said blankly, blank history is absolutely forbidden to study, and those who violate this rule are rebellious molecules, for whom there is no need for sympathy. Quote. Having said that, Akainu turned his head to look at Kong and said, Marshal Kong, I request to join the ranks of the 5 vice admirals of buster call. Hearing this, Kong glanced at Akainu, then looked at the others, nodded and said, okay, is there anyone else? I'll go too, Kuzan said lazily. A huge figure flashed in his mind. I'm going too. I'm going too. And me. 3 more vice admirals raised their hands. Oh, everyone is so active. If that's the case, then I won't go. Kizaru said slowly. Very well, it's settled like this. Kong nodded, glanced at Garp, and continued. There's one more thing, I was going to talk about it later, but since everyone is here, let's take the opportunity to let everyone make a decision. Hearing Kong's words, Garp moved Vivi for a meal, and then continued to eat senbei. Sengoku and Zephyr looked as usual, and the others looked at Kong strangely. Seeing everyone looking at him, Kong paused and moved his lips slightly. Garp brought back a young man named Zhongyang some time ago, should you still remember? Chapter 19 Kong's Temptation. Publicity. Kong's words stunned almost everyone except Sengoku, Garp, and Zephyr. They naturally know about Zhongyang, the boy brought back by the hero Garp, the owner of Conqueror Hockey, the academy taught by Admiral Zephyr himself, and the most potential candidate for the next generation of Admiral. Shin, how could they not know about Zhongyang? And some people even plan to meet this young man with all the auras in one body. It's just that they can't understand why Marshal Kong mentioned Zhongyang at this time. Only Garp paused while eating the senbei, and sighed in his heart. Although he knew that this kid was definitely not easy at the beginning, he didn't expect to have Conqueror Hockey. It's a headache. Although Zhang Yang is still very young, he has a conqueror haki who can only appear in 1 in a million people, and his own qualifications are also very good. My original idea was to train him into the next generation of admiral or even marine marshal. But recently, this flamboyant performance has made me a little worried. Kong said, looked at Zephyr. Zephyr nodded, and then said, when he first entered the academy, although this Zhang Yang had conqueror haki, the constitution was very weak, only a little stronger than ordinary people, but his potential was strong. It was terrifying. In just over a month, his constitution reached the level of a student who just went to the 5th floor, and during that time, I found that he exuded a faint conqueror haki every time he rested, as if he had been able to control conqueror haki in general. Quote, isn't it possible? Without guidance, how could it be possible to learn to control the conqueror haki on your own? A vice admiral said in shock. It's not impossible, the use of conqueror haki was not discovered at first. Sengoku said calmly. In addition, Zephyr continued, he also has some very weird fighting skills and swordsmanship, and his power is very strong. According to my speculation, Zhang Yang's strength is probably far more than the average 5th floor student. What? Hearing Zephyr's words, even Kong couldn't help Vivi's color change. You must know that the students on the 5th floor are the elites of the future marine. Kuzan, Akainu and Kazaru came from there, far exceeding the strength of the general 5th floor members. What is the achievement of publicizing the future? Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help being shocked by Zhang Yang's terrifying potential, and even Garp didn't eat senbei at this time. Zephyr, are you telling the truth? Kong said with an extremely serious face. If it is true, it must be taken seriously. Such a genius with terrifying potential, if he becomes Marine's person, it is definitely a super boost for Marine. On the contrary, if he becomes Marine's enemy, it is very terrifying enemy. Even though he barely touched, my eyesight is not wrong. Zephyr affirmed. Hearing this, Kong fell silent. Originally, he planned to listen to other people's opinions before deciding how to treat Zhang Yang, but now it seems that if he doesn't confirm it himself, I'm afraid he really can't feel at ease. After a while, Kong seemed to have decided something, raised his head and said, this is the end of today's meeting. Let's disband. Everyone was stunned for a moment, and then they understood what they were, and one by one they withdrew in an orderly manner. However, not everyone backed out. Sengoku, Garp, and Zephyr stayed behind because they understood that Kong still had something to say. Garp, don't you have anything to say? Kong asked, looking at Garp who had been eating senbei. Ha ha, that kid Zhang Yang is pretty good, Kong, just relax. Garp laughed. How can you make me relax? Kong shook his head and said to Zephyr, Zephyr, you bring Zhang Yang over tomorrow, I'll make sure for myself, Sengoku, Garp, you guys will come too. Understood. Sengoku and Zephyr nodded, only Garp looked indifferent. Zhang Yang, who was still in Marine College, didn't know anything about this meeting. He practiced his spiritual power all night. Early the next morning, Zhang Yang ate breakfast with Bastille in high spirits. The playground is ready to start a new phase of exercise. After taking out the training table and looking at it, Zhang Yang was ready to start the first training, the so-called 2-kilometer sprint. This is the rhythm of running to death. Muttering a word, Zhang Yang walked to the runway, just about to start sprinting, but found Zephyr walking towards him. Follow me. Leaving such a sentence, Zephyr turned around and walked towards the Marine Academy gate. Zhang Yang was stunned for a while, although he was a little confused, he still followed. Only soon, when Zhang Yang found out that Zephyr was taking him out of the Marine Academy and walked towards the Marine headquarters, he felt a tightness in his heart. He had already guessed what it was going to do. Is this day finally here? Zhang Yang took a deep breath, and his emotions slowly calmed down. After a while, the marshal's office arrived, and he walked in under the leadership of Zephyr. Zhang Yang took a look, and as he expected, Kong, Sengoku, Garp were all here, plus Zephyr, Marine's top leaders were all here. Marshal Kong, Sengoku Admiral, Garp Vice Admiral. Zhang Yang saluted them, and Zephyr walked over to Sengoku and sat down. Kong nodded, looked at Zhang Yang lightly and said, Zhang Yang, it has been almost 2 months since you came to Marine headquarters. Yes, Marshal Kong. Zhang Yang nodded. I've been watching you since Garp brought you back because I knew you were extraordinary from the first sight, so in your opinion, what does Marine exist for? Kong stared at Zhang Yangdao. Coming. Zhang Yang moved in his heart, pretending to be thinking on the surface, and muttered, maintaining the order of the world. Protecting ordinary people who have been mutilated by pirates. That's right. As if thinking of something, Zhang Yang raised his head and said without evading his eyes, for justice. Hearing this, Kong, Sengoku, Garp, were all stunned for a moment, and then Garp laughed and said, Boy, well said. Kong glanced at Garp, then stared at Zhang Yang and said, Justice. If I told you that yesterday I killed 10 ordinary people in order to save 100 hostages caught by pirates, do you still think Marine is just? Why isn't it just? Marshal, didn't you save 100 people? I don't think it's wrong. Zhang Yang said with a strange look. Kong didn't speak, staring at Zhang Yang's eyes, as if to see through Zhang Yang. For a while, a smile suddenly appeared on Kong's face. Nice mentality, Zhang Yang. I hope you can become Marine's pride in the future. Go back to training, Kong said with a chuckle. Yes, Marshal Kong. Zhang Yang saluted, then turned around and walked out the door. However, just as Zhang Yang's hand touched the doorknob, 2 extremely powerful auras gushed out from Kong and Sengoku, pressing down on Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang's footsteps paused, and there was hardly any hesitation in his body. The spiritual pressure spewed out. Boom! The wooden door shattered in an instant, the sawdust splashed, Zhang Yang lifted his foot and walked out, disappearing from the sight of Kong and the others. Kong, Sengoku, what are you two doing? Garp was instantly furious, only Zephyr's expression didn't change. Garp, don't get excited. Sengoku explained quickly, just to test him, nothing else. Ah, is that so? Ha ha. Hearing this, Garp was stunned for a while, then laughed awkwardly. Kong shook his head helplessly, then looked at the direction where Zhang Yang was leaving and nodded. I actually endured the momentum of me and Sengoku. Not bad, and just now, has this kid already understood the control method of Conqueror Hockey? Sengoku, what are you doing? See. It feels a little different from the Conqueror I've seen before, but it wasn't like acting just now, so it shouldn't be a problem. Sengoku pondered. In that case, Zephyr, let's do our best to train him. Kong still trusted Sengoku's words, nodded and said to Zephyr. Understood. Zephyr nodded. At the same time, on the other side, the publicity that has stepped out of the Marine headquarters. PFF'd. A mouthful of blood spurted out. Zhang Yang wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, his face pale. Damn old men, it's too much to try. Holding the wall beside him, Zhang Yang scolded weakly. Chapter 21 Year. These old guys are really ruthless. Zhang Yang leaned against the wall and cursed with a pale face. Fortunately, it was just pure aura that attacked him just now, otherwise Zhang Yang would have stepped on Shunbu and fled. After all, although Kong and Sengoku's auras are strong, his Reiatsu is no longer the negligible level it used to be. Completely bearable. However, it was a blessing in disguise. After this time, Zhang Yang could finally relax and stay in Marine. If nothing else, due to the test just now, although Kong would not trust him 100%, as long as there is nothing wrong with Zhang Yang, Marine will definitely not be suspicious of him again. More importantly, Kong just revealed that he knew about his white fight and kendo, but he didn't ask anything. That is to say, Kong doesn't care about these at all, and Zhang Yang can use white fight, kendo, and even shunpo in an open and honest manner. But forget about the Ghost Road. After all, the Ghost Road is just like setting fire and discharging, it is too conspicuous. All in a word, after the test just now, Zhang Yang can finally relax and train, and he no longer has to hide and practice for a white fight. It's not in vain for my hard work. Vivi raised his mouth, Zhang Yang took a few breaths, and returned to Marine Academy in a vain step. After all, he was a marshal and an admiral. Even if he could bear it, it would not be very pleasant. He just found a place to rest on the playground for a while, and when he felt no discomfort, Zhang Yang twisted his neck and came to the track again. Then next, let's get started. There was a flash of light in his eyes, Zhang Yang moved his feet, and the whole person shot out directly. The ultimate workout starts here. 11 quintillion 111 quadrillion 111 trillion 111 billion 111 million 111,111. When one person is doing something seriously, time always passes quickly, and a year is not long. It's not short, but inadvertently, it is indeed fleeting. See Circle Calendar on June 17, 1501. Marine Headquarters, Marine Fando, Marine Academy. A group of boys and girls led by a Marine Lieutenant Colonel came to the door of Marine Academy. A fiery red sun hung from the sky. Under the hot sun, the faces of the boys and girls were full of strong expressions. If you can enter the Marine Headquarters Academy, it means that you are all excellent children. After entering here, you will study for 6 years and gain the power to fight against pirates and maintain justice. However, during this period, you will eat a lot of suffering, a lot of fatigue. Tell me, can you bear it? Marine walked in front of the group of boys and girls and shouted loudly, which instantly made the group of young boys and girls flush with excitement. Yes. Good. Marine nodded with satisfaction, and continued, after entering the interior, you will be assessed and finally decide on your learning environment. The better the assessment results, the better the things you will learn naturally. Now, everyone stand up. Ready to enter Marine Academy. Marine said. He turned to hold the giant door with both hands, and his hands violently exerted force, and blue veins burst out on his forehead and arms. Amidst the exclamations of the boys and girls, the giant door slowly opened until there was enough space for 3 people. After passing through the space side by side, Lieutenant Colonel Marine stopped breathing heavily in sweat. All in. Marine gasped, and the boys and girls hurried in one by one. Then Lieutenant Colonel Marine sighed and closed the giant door with great effort. In Marine Academy, the boys and girls who came to the new environment were looking at the surrounding environment curiously, when suddenly a girl pointed to the playground and said, "There is someone there." Hearing the girl's words, everyone else looked over and saw a 13 or 14-year-old boy jumping while carrying a huge barbell in the hot sun, dressed in a marine suit as if he was scooping out of water. When I came out, I was already soaked, and sweat was dripping from my chin like a faucet. So handsome. Looking at the boy's handsome face, which was covered in sweat, a group of girls immediately exclaimed. As if feeling a change, the handsome boy raised his head and glanced at the boys and girls lined up in pairs, which immediately caused the girls to scream. He just looked at me. No, it's about me. Look at me. The girls were nympho, but the boys were gnashing their teeth angrily, eager to rush up and slap the handsome boy on the playground immediately. Is this guy also a student here? Damn, the girls are all attracted to him. Yeah, just come in a little earlier than us. How cool. It won't take long for us to be like him. That's right. The boys were dissatisfied one by one. Oh, so confident. A joking voice suddenly sounded, and the boys and girls were shocked, and then they were shocked to find that the handsome boy who was still jumping with a load just now suddenly appeared among them, holding a barbell in one hand, with a smile on his face. Stared at the boys who were still complaining just now. Seeing the handsome boy appear in front of them so strangely, especially seeing the huge barbell in his hand, he was so frightened that he was speechless. Zhang Yang, don't scare them. A somewhat helpless voice sounded, and I saw a man in a black suit walking over, looking at the boys who were too scared to speak by the handsome boy and the girls who were nympho. Everyone is lined up, now the assessment will begin. Quote. Cut, it's so boring. Zhang Yang shrugged in dissatisfaction, threw the barbell over his shoulders, and walked to the track to continue his frog leap. That's right, this handsome guy who makes the girls scream, and the bastard who makes the boys grit his teeth, is Zhang Yang.